Blog Talk Radio.
And right now, yes.
About the Torah studies, just to share this right here as we're working on tonight's broadcast. And, in the sabbatical studies, there's the challenge, for the disciple as you're growing in grace and you're seeking to share and communicate. How within this Shabua, how within this 7, within, say, the 7 days, to get the fullness out of it. And this is some of the pearls. I share this with, I share this not with the dogs. It's not intended for the dogs. It's not intended for the hogs, but for the chabarim, the brothers and sisters. So brothers and sisters, no doubt, have experiences or will experience it. You always notice that after you just go through it, sometimes not really sure, okay, what all is in it. After you go through, say, the Torah portion, and this happens often from the first day to the Shabbat day, to the 7th day. With our broadcast, we come forward on the air, play some music, touch on the Psalms, some of the basics of the Torah portion. And sometimes it's just basic. It's just basic things. Like sometimes you have to start out just really, really basics. Sister Kalunji has in one of his tunes, I think it's this song up there, and maybe make a little edit, out of that right there, so that ones and ones will pick up on it, kind of when we zoom in on a relic or something like that, where sometimes ones and ones look for something strange and extraordinary. Something strange, unusual, like in a movie, like in Babylon, like in the World Flesh and Satanic Clone, they confuse, the history, the prophecy, the mystery, and there's a lot of pseudo. I call it disinfo, not information overload. You heard that expression. They say information overload. You have heard, people of old time have said information overload, but we say to you, there's actually disinfo. Such as the latter day technology, they shall go to and fro. Daniel's prophecy, and knowledge shall increase, the knowing of things. You can know things good, you can know things evil, you can, to know, what do you know? That's the question there. What do you know? And how do you know that you know what you know? So the experiential aspects of the Torah portion studies, the reading and feedings are very important. And again, this sort of a challenge is here before us, even with this Torah portion. So much so that even the previous Torah portion is very interesting. There's a lot of metaphysical, spiritual, iritical, interesting kind of tidbits and other things that I know a lot of folks are interested in or picking up for themselves. But it's focusing. It's almost like with the tabernacle in the wilderness. And we talk about the ringing of the alarm or blowing the alarm, ringing the alarm. Ring the alarm. Another sound is dying. Oh, no, that's not the reason for ringing the alarm. It's not. God bless the soul of Tenor, Saw, and all the other brothers and sisters. We recognize what was going on at that particular time within the tribe and the movement. It's like with the Bnei Yisrael in the wilderness. It's like their situation in the wilderness. Like, at what point are we looking at their situation here in the Torah portion reading and feeding for this 37th? So we're looking at 37. It's the 37th weekly Torah portion, Rastafari sabbatical study for this Shabbat strong, keeping it sabbatical, keeping it Levitical. In 1937, the Constitution and the bylaws of the Ethiopian World Federation Corporate. Then we have Amos, chapter 9, verse 7. In chapter 9, the Schofield Study Bible has up here final prophecy of dispersion, of the diaspora, of the being scattered, right? The being scattered so far, right? So far and so near to the four corners, so to speak, right? Of the earthly plane. What a very interesting plane. It's not a planet. The planet of the wandering star. It's a plane as the heavens turn around this earthly plane here in the season. So there's a particular discipline. For example, when the cloud, right, when Anan, the Anan lifted up, when the cloud lifted up, that was the time to signal for the camp, right, and all the camps, all the other, the camp overall, the camp of Yisrael to move forward, regardless whether it was day or whether it was night. To move forward, to keep it moving. And then when the cloud, but from the low degrees, the Hebrew roots, when the Anan move forward, right? They to move forward. When it settled, whether it settled there for a day, right, for a week, for a moon, a month, for a shana, for a year, that's how long they stayed there as the cloud, right? The cloud technology. So ain't nothing new under the sun. So there was a cloud technology there in the wilderness. Now think about this for a moment. How long can we look at so-called recorded history and we don't see nothing about any cloud technology other than in the scripture, other than in HaTorah and John's directions, instructions, right? So note that right there. So it's like when we're studying the Torah portion reading and feeding, right? Learning to read the sign language and also taking heed to the pattern. So say in this Shavua, what is this Shabbat? This is Shabbat such and such, right? For example, this is Shabbat, right? This is Shabbat Shalach. shalach, send, shalach lika, send for yourself, right? Send for yourself, anashim, men, to do what? Yatoru, to tour, to spy out, to search, right? To search out. So quote, search out, end quote, right? It's the same as to spy out, but the Hebrew word there is to tour, like somebody going on tour, right? Go on tour, right? To tour the land, right? To tour the land. Let's study this right here, my brothers and sisters. Now, the connection here is so very interesting, especially when we look at the history, as Bobby Hemming, God bless his soul as well. Remember what this brother said, and we have the audio, the clip right there where he says, first comes the history, and then is the mystery. Now, building on that, in Yahweh Truth and Life, revealing the prophecy, right? Remember here in Amos chapter 9 is the final prophecy, the final. So there were other prophecies, but this is the final prophet I see. Seen, sight, because without a vision, without a vision, the people perish. We have this example, right, of the B'nai Yisrael. And here is kind of the epicenter, right, of their disobedience and the role that the spies played in bringing forward an evil report, which discouraged the people, right? Even as we, the black people, right, and our ancestors in the previous generation, right, and generation were discouraged, at least the previous generation were discouraged, right, to go forward, to go up to Aliyah, right? Once again, this theme of the Aliyah, even the previous Beha Elotika, the Aliyah stepping up. You know, when you step up, when you walk up a ladder, there's steps, right? There's one step, there's next step. You tell your children, your youths, don't run up the steps, don't skip steps, right? Don't skip steps. Now, of course, sometimes people say, well, in the crisis or whatever, sometimes you might have to run and you might have to skip steps. Okay, that might happen, right? But there's a usual practice in good building and sustainable repatriation. There are steps. There are steps. This is why Gurmawi Nagus and Neges sent them forward, sent them back, so to speak, and said, next time send the right people. Are you truly and duly prepared? That's the question. You hear? Shema, give ear. Are you truly and duly prepared? Because first is the history, right? What is I and I story? What is our narrative? You hear ones in the world, and Sequoia speaking about, you know, how ones have to get out ahead of the narrative. They got to get out ahead of the narrative. Or others would say, or controlling the narrative, right? Others have a control, so-called black people's narrative. What is black people's narrative? It's like polytheism, right? It's like every God, which is no God, and they turn their back on the true good, the true God, right? Whose word and prophecy is right and exact. That's right, because it's right and exact. It's accurate. So here in this Torah, shalach leka, lak tilkalachu, lak, send, right, tilkalachu, all of, send those to send and sending, send thou men, and they were to search out the land. So how many there were? There were 12. Have you heard about the 12 pioneer settlers? What are called? And see, this is not official. This is something that, you know, like we're talking about our history, our story, right? So there's these 12, the 12, some say, who divided the land, the 12. Remember, there were 12, but there were 10 who brought forward an evil report. Now, here's what we really have to study to show I and I ourselves approve. We're applying this to even the Shashamene, the land grant, the Mount Koda, the land grant, right? And from such a time, especially in the 60s, right? In the 60s, and keep in mind the 67, you know, the 67 resolution, but in the 60s, so say post 67, right? Coming forward, right? And there's been a lot of false narratives. That's part of the evil report, right? And lies and false narratives that have been circulated. But there were 12, 10 brought back what scripture calls an evil report. And that report, let's note what that report says, because the spies that went to 12, the Anashim, the men, they did say that the land was Toba, Ethiopia, Tobia. They said it was a Toba, right? That the Aretz was Toba, right? Tobia. It was a beautiful, the Tob, right? Archaic Afro-Shemitic word that means good, Tob, the Tob land, Tobia. It was Toba in the Hebrew, like feminine, like she good, right? Toba or Tova. Somebody enunciates it as Tova. They didn't say the land was good. It was a good land, just as Hashem had said. Just as Adonai had said, it's a good land. Adonai told them it's a good land. They went and they said it was a good land. They brought forward the fruit of the land. So it's a very good land. So was that the evil report? Was that the no? That was, you said that was true. They just confirmed what Jehovah already told them. But they said that we are not able. They did not see themselves as being able. Note this. They said we are not able to go up to possess the land. Right? Why? Because of the giants, the Nephilim. They were like caught up on conspiracy theories. Oh, in Africa, you go to Africa, they don't accept you as African, and the Africans this and the Africans that. This is like those Israelites that ain't right. They are trying to make their own righteousness, as Scripture says, right? Their own righteousness, but they have not submitted themselves to he who he be is divine majesty, Kadamawi, Haile Selassie's righteousness. But those of Aina Gevir, faith comes by what? Hearing, and hearing by the Dabar. The Dabar, the word. Where are we? Midbar, right? Bamidbar. We're in the Midbar, Dabar, in the wilderness, or the confusion of words, the confusion out in this wilderness, the wilderness. Although the wilderness was supposed to be on a short journey, some say 11 days, right? But moreover, about a 40-day journey turned into a 40-year wandering. So it's like many of I and I, even in this dispensation, this time, right? Even in this, what is called and referred to as 400th year, 2019, as per 1619, right? What is called that? So if we're speaking about the 400 years, we also have to acknowledge, where do we get this idea from? Why does 400 year matter? Right? Why does 400 years matter? Why does 400 years really matter? And see, a lot of ones will give you certain information, right? But because they leave out our divine heritage, it is out of order. It's just like with the spies who came back and told lies, right? They said, oh, the Nephilim in the land, and the people are Anak, they're the children of Anak, and the Anakim, and the Nephilim, right? And they're stronger than us. And we, in their sight, are like grasshoppers. Get that? You get that right there? Think about the psychosis that's developing here among the lost sheep, or the psychosis, the cray-crayness. You wonder why things are so crazy today? Well, it didn't begin just today. Some of us is born into this cray-crayness, right? But as we begin to study, right, what the history, how did it get here? How did we get here? What did the previous, right, generation? Remember, there was one generation that he had brought out, Mitzrayim, but because of their lack of emunah, their lack of yea and amen, their lack of naaman, right, of admittance of the yea and amenness, right? The amen is to admit as true, naaman, because the lack of naaman. They did not know what jamin, right? But instead, they went after their own bad mind and evil imagination. They was like, no, we're not able. Notice what they said. They said, we. They relied on themselves and didn't recognize that who brought them up and out of Mitzrayim. So those redeemed people, let's not lose sight of that. They were redeemed and they were Jah people. All right, we can say they are an example of the chosen people. People have a lot of folly, a lot of confusion, a lot of on what these things mean. You know what I mean? Like we saw the 400 years. How many of them tell you when they say the 400 years, why does the 400 years matter? Why is the 400 years important? How many have said, well, you see, in Genesis chapter 15, how many of them? I said memes all over. Because the 400 years, Ados who? Ados Hitler. What are we talking about? Right? What are you speaking of? All right? And some are trying to claim the land in which they are strangers as their own, and that's outside, right? That's outside of the covenant, the contractual agreement. Let's recognize this right here. It's interesting that ones and ones seek to comply or acknowledge the standards, the statutes, the laws, the commandments, the judgments of the nations, but disregard the very same of their own. Right? This is what's so very interesting. This is why, notice their perspective. We are not able because of conspiracy theories. All right, the Nephilim. Now, are we saying the Nephilim didn't exist? No, the Nephilim existed. They were the fallen ones, the giants. Yeah, this actually existed. Of course it did. So what? See, this is what Caleb, right? Mainly, it was Caleb that spoke about. It was Caleb and Oshea or Yehoshua of Joshua, Old Testament Joshua, right? Of the tribes of Ephraim. Get this? Of Ephraim and Yehudah, right? Ephraim and Judah. Caleb said, we can do this. Right? And Yehoshua, Oshea, who Moshe changed his name to Yehoshua, right? That Yahweh, right? That he saves, right? He says, change his name. They were the ones who said that we can go up, we can do this right now. So there were two, right, of the spies, the searchers that went forward, among them that were sent, that brought back a good report. And the good report, see, all of them said the land was good over. I mean, how can you not see that it's a beautiful land? You know what I mean? When we look at Africa, especially east of the river now, how can you not say that it's not a good land, right? People say today, oh, Africa's a beautiful place, it's a wonderful place. But then they bring forward what? Evil. We're not able to do nothing because of the Nephilim in there because of all this and that. And this is the same that was said back in the 60s, especially the late 60s and the early 70s and 80s. And this is where the lost sheeple, the lost black and brown people here in the Americas and the Caribbean began to wander around and around. So we have a generation later. Isn't it interesting that many of the baby Rasta or the Rasta babies, the youths that are coming forward now, right, of a certain generation, and then we can ask, we can look in our own familial lineages and, well, what were they doing? Back in those days and times, if we've been born in this dispensation and our parents are from that dispensation, it's not to put no particular blame on them. We often kind of have a knee-jerk reaction like, oh, how come they didn't tell us about such and such? But to really, from an objective perspective, right, to look at and say, well, I wonder what they were doing. These things I'm finding about the 1920s and 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and around the 70s, 80s and 90s. To some degree, I can give some testimony because this is the time in which, you could say Earth time, you know what I mean? From Earth Day forward. But before that, hearing from the parents and them, and then really getting a good picture. See, because when you get a good picture of them, right, the history, then that which is hidden or secret, the so-called myth story or the myth story, right? One can see the prophecy, right? When you recognize who you are and where you stand, your standing. What is your standing? And we say standing, we're not just saying overstanding. When we say standing, we're not just saying understanding. When we say standing, we're also saying, what is your inner standing? What's your standing? It's very clear that the spies that brought back an evil report and told lies, they had a bad standing, right? Or no standing or no good standing. They had no good standing. They said, we were as grasshoppers in the eyes of other people. How do you know what you look like in somebody else's eyes? But see, this is the lost sheeple's psychosis, even to this very day. How do you know what you look like? And even besides, who cares? You know what I'm saying? Especially look at the context of it. They said we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. How could, right, Israel, the majority of the people, go for that? You see what I'm saying? But notice, they were still the chosen people. They were still the people that Jah had redeemed. They still were the redeemed people. But here's the key, that those who he had brought out, that initial group that he had brought out, he did not bring them in because of a lack of emunah, a lack of imnet, a lack of yea and amen, of admitting the truth, all right? Even when the truth was right before them, wait, hold on for a moment. He who be has brought us out of Egypt. And the Canaan, right, politically, politically was under, right, the hegemony of Mitzrayim, the Benai Mitzrayim, the sons of the Mitzrayimites or the Egyptian, the Kemites, whatever you might want to call them. But you say the Benai Mitzrayim. In other words, it was like the Canaan like countries today. They're dependent on America with the obelisk, England with the obelisk, right, or Rome with the obelisk, right, with the bull penis. Let's be specific, right, obelisk, right. And therefore, if he who be, not if, but because he who be, that was Caleb's point, all right. That was Caleb and Yehoshua's point, but Caleb was more vocal, right. And note this: that after the 40 years, who had survived? Notice who had survived after this 40 years. Now, when we look at the pioneer settlers, all right, I would call the Ethiopian World Federation pioneer settlers, but that's not quite correct. It's almost like with these Israelites. All the same thing, right? Well, they're Israelites, yeah, but they say a lot and do a lot of things that ain't right, right? And they speak against the prophecy. They speak against his divine majesty. They speak against we, the children of Ethiopia, in direct opposition. But does that surprise us? Should it really surprise us if we really are growing in grace and the knowledge of the King of Kings Christ, Yeshua HaMoshiach, Jesus Christus, our Black Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? If we really are growing, does it really surprise us? Just coming to maturity, coming to stability, all right? Check. Okay, that right there shows us, right, where we're at. This gives us a good view, right, on the past, not just 40 years, but it's also the Babylonian prophecy. Remember the final prophecy. I remember how the prophets, this is getting into another area of study, but it's like also there is the Babylonian captivity. Remember the Babylonian captivity? That was how many years? That was 70 years. And who was that for? Was that for the Israelites or was that for the Judahites? That was for the Judahites, right? We say the Judahites, someone say the Judahites, right? The connection with the North American Negro. Amongst the so-called North American Negro is a true Judahite. Even we, the black Jews of the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Moa, Anbesses, and Negeda Yehuda, the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, root of David. Weep not, behold, Gormawi, Kedamawi, Haile Selassie. His imperial majesty, Haile Selassie the first, has prevailed to open the book, boom, loose the 7 seals thereof. So all of these things converge, correspond, right, and also bring out the roots and the groundation and the prerequisite, as we have in the preamble of the Ethiopian World Federation Constitution and bylaws, the preamble of our divine heritage. You see? Some, when they hear divinity, they start to think about all sort of other gods, pseudo-trinities, other people's OPP Elohim, other people's Elohim, right? Instead of looking at I Judeo-Christian roots, right? That's the context of the prophetic fulfillment. Conquering line of the tribe of Judah. What don't you get, Rasta? I'm speaking to those who want to bring in all this and that and these other things, and the ancestors did not bring that in. Especially those righteous among the ancestors, right? First is the history. You see, a lot of them don't either know the history or they're trying to make up history, right? They're trying to make up. This is almost like what was going on with the spies that told lies, right? They say that they were like the heathen in the land, the Canaanites. They were like giants, and we in their eyes, in other people's eyes, were as grasshoppers. How in the world do you know what you was like? And did you stand next to them? They didn't even get as close to them to stand next to them. All they saw some things from a distance. From a distance, God is watching us, right? And watching you from a distance. From a distance, they saw this. I was thinking about how they have, like, in the Mediterranean, the Southern Europe area, and some other countries, they have these, like, carnivals, and I forgot what they call it, but where they have, like, the San Gennaro kind of festivals, where they have, like, these kind of like tall, like people on spokes, so giants, where they do like these giants in their parades. You know what I'm saying? On stilts and everything like that. I'm thinking that maybe the Israelites, like the spies, the 12 spies, from a distance, this is what they were seeing. And they said, whoa, those are the giants. And what those people were actually doing, like a lot of people do in many different regions of the world, they recognize that, oh, other people used to be here. Remember, like when they brought in those other peoples, those Gentiles, those heathen nations into the 10 tribes, the Samaritan, the northern Israel, right? And they worshiped their own gods, but then they did some syncretic kind of like blend, you know, of their own worship with what they had got from some of the, I call them apostate, you know, some of the apostate Israelites, right? The Hebrew Israelites before the Hebrew Israelites were removed by Assyria. So what they might have seen was like an ancient San Gennaro festival, right? Where the people had their people, right, pretending to be in honor of the Nephilim, you know, and the so-called gods of the land that the Canaanites, the Afro-Canaanites were worshiping, right? That, I mean, even today, sometimes they will scar their children, or even with that neck, you know, the necklace thing where they make the neck long, or they shape the skull of the child to be elongated, right? This is like an homage, right, to the so-called divinities or the deities or the so-called the pseudo-gods, the false trinities that they worship. So from a distance, they were seeing maybe men on stilts. And, oh, there's the sons of Anak. Because remember, note this right here, that when the Torah says what it says concerning this particular portion here and concerning the spies in the land, it says that when they went up into the land, it was a particular time. Did you note that, Chabarim? Did you note that right there? It was a particular time. It says right here, now the time, the Ira was the time or the season of the first ripe grapes. That was at the end of the first Aliyah, right? The first Aliyah, the Rishon Aliyah for this Shabbat Shalach, for Senvet Lach, right? Shabbat Shalach, and when the Sabbath, Sen, Shalach Lika, Senvet Lach, Sen Til Kalach. Here in Numbers chapter 13, verse 20. And what the land is. This is part of the instruction. This was their to-do list. Whether it be fat, whether the land be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not. And be y'all of good courage and bring forth the fruit. Don't be weak-hearted, but be of good courage. Hartical, not artificial, hartical, and bring forth the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. So those seasonal times, there were celebrations even among other nations, you know, the seasons. You know, this is kind of what humanity universally, these are the major changes that affect, you know, so-called civilized and uncivilized, so to speak. When they civilized, they have their own order and civilization, while others just look around and see what nature does, and they might repeat what nature does, as it be. Just to point that out right there. So the particular times they went into the land was during the time of the first ripe grapes. So for many peoples, there are religious services, spiritualistic, ancient, tribalistic, other harvest, fertility rites, praying to the Elohim or those who they assume to be, whatever construct or understanding of the Elohim or the Trinities, as it were, they would seek to please their particular peculiar deity. So in the Canaan, they said, we saw the giants or the Nephilim, the fallers, the fallen ones, the sons of Anak, which come of the Nephilim. Notice what they said. They said, we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, which are of the Nephilim. Remember, I was saying that there was spread around conspiracy theories, some things that had, how can we say, there was Nephilim, but what a lot of people began to believe. You see what I'm saying? There are real monsters. You see what I'm saying? But then there's also the pseudo and the disinfo about the real monsters that will allow the real monsters to creep up on you if you follow after disinfo. This is what happens with the spies that told lies. And there we saw the Nephilim, sons of Anak, which come up with Nephilim. And we were, here's the proof of it. They say, and we were in our own sight, right? We were in our own sight. So this is in their own estimation, like what you think of yourself, right? They said, we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. No, they said, we saw these giants, these ancient giants, so to speak, the Nephilim, right? And the sons of Anak, the Anaki, right? The chokers, the stranglers, in a sense, the chokers, the stranglers, right? And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. And so, indeed. And like this, we were in our own sight. Thus, and so we were in our own sight. They were in their own sight, as grasshoppers. Right? This is how they took who they were. They said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. I mean, how do you count that? The same thing that haven't black folks said that over the past 40 plus years, 40 to 60, right? Say over the past, 70 years. If you go in Africa, them people will eat you up. They'll put you in a pot, like in that Tarzan movie. Remember that Tarzan movie? They'll put you in a pot and they'll eat you up. Without no sauce. But they don't got no sauces like we got, You know what I mean? Some foolishness like that. And people will grow up believing that, right? Even until they become, they'll be young fools, right? Young fools who turn their back on John Law, Torah, instruction. And guess what? They will become old fools, right? And then some fools will begin to call them elder. My goodness. Right? My goodness, I have no goodness but you. Oh, Yahweh Eloheinu. Yeah, so they said right here, and they brought up an evil report, right? A bad-minded report of the land which they had searched to the Bnei Yisrael, saying the land to which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. How do they know the land? I mean, think about this. People coming out of Egypt, right? Coming out of an ancient, like Disneyland on steroids. Right? All sort of stuff. That's why we call it spiritual Egypt today. Know that, right? They are now telling the other folks that this land actually eats people up. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. Well, it depends on, did they see all the men? Think about it. They were there for 40 or so days, looking at the land, going up and down throughout the land. And they are going in the land at a what? At a distance. Note this. You know what I'm saying? They're at a distance. They're not really going up close. Hey, hi, we're the Israelites. We out in the world. They're not doing that. All right? They basically go. I mean, they could have, but basically, they most likely did not. Right? They most likely did not. They didn't say, hey, well, we met some people over here. It's not like in the time of Yehoshua. Now, it's good and interesting to compare the first mission to Africa mission. Remember the mission to Africa Minority Report? And give thanks when Ras Yasan, he was reason on that, and he had mentioned that, the Minority Report, the mission to Africa, which we were able to get the full, even the redacted part. There's two parts of it. There was one part that we had seen from years ago in bad Xerox photocopies, and then there was a part 2 of it, which was kind of like kept kind of secret. And give thanks to, the Israeli, the Rasta Israelis and Rastafari, our brothers there. They made the other part of that free. You know what I mean? So we were able to get the fuller document, and we have that at the RasTafariGroundation as well. And give thanks for the donation, the tithe, the free will offering that keep these platforms and the majority of what we have to share as free as possible. The tithes, the donation, because that's also part of I and I fellowship. That's also part of I and I worship, because it's worth something to I and I to take the time here and even to share this. Because we could just share this with a few and just rush off and do our own thing. Some of the Israelites, no doubt did that. When we look at the narrative of some of the Phalashas of Ethiopia, so forth and so on, some of them say they broke off from the party of Moses and kind of made a next turn and made it over here, made it over there. Now, whether all that is right and accurate, that's another aspect right there. But the scripture even says those who came out with Moses, to emphasize there might have been others who came out not with Moses. We have the mixed multitude from the previous Torah portion. The mixed multitude, they were at the uttermost part of the camp, because everything is in proximity to the holy place, right? Like in the army too. Foundation, right? The foundation, the groundation, the foundation in the holy place, that center. Even with the lighting of menorah, right? That central shemesh, the sun, the central shaft, that center branch, the heart, right? Having the three on this side and the three on the other side, the three upper and the three lower. Some would say chakras, ciphers, lights. Right, so centering, keeping it hartical, right, keeping it Levitical, and here, keeping it sabbatical.
Then returned they unto Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is from Jerusalem a Sabbath day's journey. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room, where abode both Peter and James and John and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon Zelotes.
From the upper room is beyond, what they beyond, distinguishing the light seekers from the beyond. Ron, say it honestly upon us, knowledge that is beyond. Old has it been told since the days of old, and I sit watching the story unfold. Yeshua gave us the code, gave us the name, kept the Maui Haile Selassie, the first will reign, the opener of the book of the seven seals. It's time for the gathering. It's the matter, and no, not the Vatican. Christ in his kingly character, we on that again. I'ma keep speaking the scriptures until I'm out of wind. Built on the true foundation, there's no shaking. There's no need of you hating, stop hesitating. How many of you have been waiting? In the upper room, we meeting in the upper room of Zion.
These all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication with the women and Mary the mother of Jesus and with his brethren. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
The upper room. The upper room.
In the Christian tradition, based on Acts 1:13, the upper room was said to be the site of the Last Supper, i.e., the cenacle. But it was not the upper room found in Mark 14:15, and Luke 22:12 is the site of the Last Supper. However, the upper room in Zion, Acts 1:13, located on Mount Zion in the city of David, was the usual place where the apostles of Adonai Baruch stayed in Jerusalem. And according to the Rastafari Encyclopedia, based upon Acts 2:42, as it is written, and they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and breaking of bread and in prayers. It was thus the first church of the Nazarene, our black master and savior, Jesus Christ, and said by many to be the first Christian church.
Then returned they unto Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is from Jerusalem a Sabbath day's journey. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room, where abode both Peter and James and John and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon Zelotes, and Judas the brother of James. These all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication with the women and Mary the mother of Jesus and with his brethren. Psalm 81.
מזמור פ/א למנצח על הגיתית לאסף.
Bukaya Hamishi. It is the 5th day of the week, and we do have a Tehillim that is recited in the 5th day of the week, found in chapter 81, and again it will be recited also in Hebrew. Let's begin. Ramnazecha, Al-Hagetit, La-Asaf, Hanenu, L'Elohim, Uze, Haru, L'Elohe, Yaakov. Su, Zemra, Utnetof, Tino, Naim, Elnavel. Tiku, Vahoresh, Shofa, Bakese, Rayom, Chage. Ki, Ho, La Yisrael, Hu, Mishpot, L'Elohe, Yaakov. Edut, Bihosef, Sam, Bezit. Alweet, Mizraim, Safat, Lo, Yadati, Eshma. Hasiroti, Misavel, Shikum, Kape, Midud, Taavona. Batzara, Karata, Vaachalze, Im, Basita, Raam, Echan, Alme, Amriva, Sela. Shema, Ame, Ve'eda, Ba, Yisrael, Im, Tishmale, Lo Yiye, V, El, Za, Vilo, Tishtachave, Leel, Necha. Anoke, Yahava, Elohe, Hamaal, Me'ered, Mizraim, Hahefpe, Va'amale. Velo Shama, Ame, Lakole, V'Yisrael, Lo Avale. Va'ashache, Bishwerut, Leba, Yaku, Bimoazote. Lu, Ame, Shomea, Li, Yisrael, Birwake, Yahaleko. Kimat, Oeve, Aknea, Val, Zore, Ashiv, Yadi. Mazane, Yahava, Yaka Hashulo, Vehe, Ita, Lolam. Vaya Akile, Mehalev, Cheta, Umizur, Devash, Asbee.
Yes. Today's daily psalm, the Hitorer Yisrael. Psalm 81. First, I want to heal up. Honorable Priest Isaac, also the Tigers Den, looking forward to Tigers Temple coming forward this Sunday, 8 p.m. sharp. Hopefully we can build a little more on the reasoning, add a little reasoning, just kind of sinking right here with tonight's podcast right here once again. That's the Honorable Priest Isaac. Have the Tigers, we just came from the Tigers Den, on a reason about the Bible, Rastafari, just what comes to I and what we need to reason on looking forward this Sunday, just giving ones and ones a kind of heads up, as we just come forward from there, here, more full on the podcast. So that'll be the 26th. Looking forward to 26th of June, 2022. Go to Priest Isaac, the Priest Isaac channel. Check it out right there. Hopefully you'll get the link right there as well. And have a reasonment and discussion, Rastafari reasonment. One of the main topics, I think the Bible, and just these and those things, the Hebrew, the Septuagint, His Majesty's Bible, heal up to ones and ones asking about His Majesty's Bible, Kedamala Hasalasi, the Book of the Seven Seals, the supplies. Just on that, on His Majesty's Bible, just to speak a couple of words right here, since that was one of the subject matters that had come up, and we just briefly, addressed. But a lot of the reasonments link with other reasonments. You know what I mean? So as we are reasoning on the Bible, of course, the Bible is going to link with other subject matters. But in reasoning on His Majesty's Bible, the Book of the Seven Seals, what we identify and call, according to the evidence, the Book of the Seven Seals of the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, Revelation 5 and 5. The Bible stock and supplies seems to have kind of gone a little bit dry over the years. There were certain places out of Africa, Kenya in particular, interesting where they printed it. You can even see in some of the copies where it was printed at the Bible Society, by ones and ones out there. The Amharic, interesting. The Amharic Bibles were actually printed in Nairobi, Kenya. But over the past, I'll say at least the past decade, things really have been drying up. But what we're going to seek to do is get in touch with printers that can print some good hard copy, many page books like the Bible. And hopefully we're going to seek to actually, reprint that particular document, because it seems as though, I don't know whether they were still printing it or we were just getting stock that they had. It was from the early, like the 90s, after the 90s, all into the early 2000s. After about, I'll say maybe a good couple of years of having regular stock, we have not been able to, besides a few of the copies that are here and there. And ones and ones should be aware. Ones and ones should be aware that not all Amharic Bibles are the authorized, revised Amharic Bible, not the King of Kings Bible. So there are other Amharic Bibles out there, but not all of them. Like today's Bibles in English, there's the KJV, right? There's a later KJV, then there's an earlier 1611. There's all these other Bibles as well. The same thing basically is what's going on even if you're searching for like Amharic Bibles or scriptures or manuscripts. But if one is able to decipher and know, well, who's who, which ones, is still good for study. It's still good, to practice and get familiar. But just to identify His Majesty's Bible, is the Bible that we are looking for, and also the Bible that we're speaking about and we're referencing. There was a question about, how much would His Majesty's Bible be? Well, the one that we know to be Kadamara Haile Selassie's, the 1961 Bible, according to the Revised Amharic Bible Word Sound. You've come across that, the Revised Amharic Bible Word Sound? Well, in that particular Amharic Bible Word Sound there, it's from July 23rd. Let's just share a little bit of it right here, since we're here on the air and this is a subject matter that is very important to many of I and I. Where His Majesty says, let's bring up this page right here. It's the foreword to His Majesty's Bible that is published separately as the Revised Amharic Bible. I'm actually scrolling through this right here, this book right here. It'd be easy if okay, here we go right here. I got it. So here, the Revised Amharic Bible by Haile Selassie, translated by Haile Selassie I Press. Information about this edition, speech of July 23rd, 1961. Speech of July 23rd, 1961. The English translation here. The following is the standard English translation of the Mekdem. The Mekdem. Mekdem come from the Ethiopic Kedem, as we even say Kedamawa, but it means forward, the forward. That was originally printed in the, quote, Book of the Seven Seals, end quote, Revelation 5:5, otherwise known as the 1961 authorized HIM, His Imperial Majesty Holy Bible. Read, study, and meditate on the word. Here's His Majesty's Word Sound. I'm sure many ones have heard this or read this, but this is the words of the preface or the foreword to the 1961 July 23rd. Ethiopia, an island of Christianity, is recorded in history as having received first the Old Testament and then the New Testament earlier than most of the countries of the world. When in Old Testament times she received the law, Torah or Rit, and when in New Testament times she received the gospel, she ensured that the scriptures were translated into the ancient language of Ge'ez, also known as Ethiopic. From those times to this, various books, both of spiritual and material profit, have periodically been compiled and written in Ge'ez. We remember with deep gratitude those fathers of old who, as time and opportunity allowed, worked with much care and labor and have left us books for the preservation of the faith and for the increase of learning and knowledge. In former ages, Ge'ez, also known as Ethiopic, was the language of the country, and so even without an interpreter, the people had no difficulty in examining and understanding the books. But just as one age succeeds another, so Amharic, which sprang from Ge'ez, or Ethiopic, gradually grew until it became the common speech of the people, taking the place of Ge'ez, or Ethiopic. At that time, Ge'ez was understood by the learned people of the church, but was not readily understood by the ordinary people. Arising from this, the scholars in their preaching and work had for centuries been forced in their teaching to interpret from Ge'ez, or Ethiopic, into Amharic. And these conditions prevail until our own times. Since a time when by Exarius, the sustainers, God's goodness, we were chosen to ascend the throne of Ethiopia. And while we have been leading our people to progress in learning and knowledge, we have labored in every way possible with an eye to their growth in spiritual and material learning and knowledge. In order to reach this goal, and realizing that the first necessity was to have the scriptures translated into Amharic and printed in bulk. In 1918, when we were still heir to the throne and regent, we chose from among the scholars some to translate the scriptures and to produce a translation alongside the Ge'ez, or Ethiopic. After this, too, at our private expense, we had a printing machine brought from Europe, established a printing press, and began to have books printed. Some of the books which we caused to be printed in Ge'ez, or Ethiopic, and Amharic at that time, read in churches and homes, have been found profitable to the establishment of faith and to spiritual strengthening. After that, noting that the mind of the people continued to grow in understanding, we arranged for a word-for-word translation into Amharic of the books of the Old and New Testaments. Our scholars completed the translation and presented it to us in 1931, and we ordered its printing. While the book was still in the press, however, enemy aggression in 1935 halted the work. Even so, when in exile in London, we gave permission for this same Bible to be printed by photo offset, and it was duly issued. By this book, our Ethiopian subjects in exile in many countries held fast to their faith and presented their petitions to Almighty Exarius, the Sustainer, as they awaited the restoration of Ethiopia. Last paragraph right here. When all honor and praise be to Exarius, the Sustainer, to God, we had brought about the liberation of Ethiopia and had entered our empire, realizing that there ought to be a revision from the original Hebrew and Greek of the existing translation of the Bible, we chose scholars qualified for the work of biblical training, and on March 6, 1947, set up a Bible committee in our palace. The committee worked with diligence for some 5 years, and on April 19th, 1952, presented the translation to us. We give heartfelt thanks to all who helped us in this work. All the ancient scriptures were written for our instruction, in order that through the encouragement they give us, we may maintain our hope with fortitude, because we desire that the light which comes from the scriptures may shine to all. This Bible, by our command and will, has been revised and printed in the 31st year of our reign. The Lion of Judah hath prevailed. Moran Besazem Negedi Yehuda. Kodamawi Kadamawi Haile Selassie, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. Siyume Gziari, Elector of God, Gziari the Sustainer. Negusa Neges Ze Ethiopia, King of Kings of Ethiopia. And we just was reading from, for ones who are seeking more info on His Majesty's Bible, see if you can get a copy of Rastafari Preliminary Notes. Rastafari Preliminary Notes on the HIM, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I Amharic Bible. This is a document that we wrote and drafted up. This was in 2011. It's from 2011. Some more books, Jah willing, hopefully we can also compose. But this has a lot of some basic information, some basic summaries as to its title, Preliminary Notes. Just some preliminary notes, some basic notes, as well as points of reference concerning His Imperial Majesty's Bible, and also why that document and other books, as we can clearly hear from His Imperial Majesty's own words, that books, printing of books and knowledge and education is very, very important. And we as Rastafari, I think especially I and I as Rastafari, we need re-education. When we say re-education from our pre-existing conditions. You know what I mean? Say this to our brother, the Honorable Priest Isaac, and asking about the Bible, and I Rastafari in the Bible. And there's many ones and ones, who have different views on the Bible. A lot of hot reasonment, to say the least, has gone on and been going on in social media. And we've heard and read and, some very passionate, heartfelt, on both sides. Some say yay, and some seem more or less to be saying nay. Now, one thing I shared with the Honorable Priest Isaac in the Tiger's Den, just a little sample of what hopefully is upcoming for this Sunday on the same platform, Honorable Priest Isaac's platform on the YouTube, the Tiger's Temple, is that many of us have pre-existing conditions. Not all of us, some have had really hard experience with counterfeit Christianity, right? Whitewashing or this religious zealots. I often use that Carrie movie example, that they're all going to laugh at you, that because the mother there, I didn't catch it when I first saw it years ago, right? And beyond being a horror movie, there's a deeper psychological point that's being made by that. It's almost like I almost felt it for Carrie on a moment. Like she was getting spiritually raped and abused by her mother with her counterfeit Christianity and her weirdness, her weird Gentile, counterfeit Christian, white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, schism, that the daughter had to kind of go within herself and develop her telepathy powers. She had to get in it's like when a person is blind, they said when a person is blind, the other senses become much more stronger. Like if you can't use this sense, and the other senses develop. I use that as an example because that was a white woman, according to the movie Carrie, and her daughter was a white girl, right? But she was a religious nut job, right? And many of us have gone through that as well. So when we hear His Majesty speak, we can say, even in some terms, one might say lovingly concerning the word of truth that's found in the Bible, some of us, even for love of His Imperial Majesty and our respect for Him, we might find that kind of hard for us to say yea and amen to because of our pre-existing condition. It's like Stockholm. It's like somebody being captured, a hostage, under some sort of, kidnapped, taken into some form of enslavement, slavery, right? As many of our people were because of the counterfeit Christianity, the whitewash, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christianity. Now, not all of us may have had those hard experiences, but from testimonies that many brothers and some, sisters as well have told me how they grew up, whether it's back in, Yard or Caribbean or even someone's down south and in different experience here in this North Country, have gone through a lot of abuse, even by well-meaning religious zealots, in our family. I didn't have that sort of experience, so I could look at it a little more objectively. Some might not be able to immediately, easily look at it objectively because of still the subjective wounds. You know what I mean? Like any wound that's not treated and healed, it can fester, and become infected. So in the reasonment that we've heard back and forth among many self-professed Rastafari, Rastas and Rastafari, because we have to acknowledge there's two kind of categories, Rastas and there's Rastafari. It's understandable. So I'd like to reason on that a little bit more, but for those of us who do and can acknowledge, right, in the proper respect what His Majesty means by that, let's not try to be overbearing like we are like proselytizing. One thing we try never to do, right, on this platform or any platform, and may the brothers and sisters who have checked out a lot that we have preached and taught and presented, let us know. Have we ever tried to proselytize? Proselytize like you're trying to make somebody a convert. No, we're saying this is the truth of the matter. This is evidence. We basically try to present, the reasoning, present the evidence, present what we are able to see and to document the facts, the data. Not so much even about my personal feelings or my personal thoughts. Occasionally I would share that. But one thing we should not be as Rastafari is like we are proselytizing, like to come like the counterfeit Christians came to a lot of people. A lot of people became Christian only for the reason that they was afraid of hell, that how hell was taught to them. You're going to burn in fire over and over again. You know what I mean? And like, unless you accept the Lord Jesus, and that's why many people took their altar call. Can you imagine that? You're in the faith or something because you're afraid of the consequences of, my goodness. I thought it was about ye shall know the truth. I thought it was about the truth, right? About preaching, proclaiming, bearing witness to the truth, right? And then allowing the chips to fall as they may or to rise as they may, right? So brothers and sisters who go forward, even from, say, this platform, from I and I reasoning, don't try to proselytize. Don't try to go around making somebody a convert. You know what I mean? Because Robeno, the rabbis, our black Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach, he already taught us against that. Or try to make somebody believe, right? Just proclaim what you know as true, what you credit, what you admit, whatever evidence, whatever testimony, and allow ones, that freedom, right? Because the devil is not going to allow ones that freedom. That's why they try to make people believe. So our overs, why some of the brothers and sisters, are a little bit turned up against the Bible, as it were. Our overs. But let's go higher.
Up the room. Up the room. Up the room. Up.
Yes, brothers and sisters. So as we are able to access more supplies, but definitely going to, we do it every couple of months, put out a search and see if there's any available stock of His Majesty's Bible. But at the present time, we're looking for more stock, but we're also looking for professional public printers that can print like the hard copy. We'd like to do the Bible as is with a nice, strong, hard copy on it. Though we print books, we have outsourced printers that print books on our behalf. We align it, we cut the book. We also do it for others who seek to have books done, or books printed on their behalf. Is because the number of pages, right? The number of pages in His Majesty's Bible, as you can see with the KJV Bible, and they have that small thin paper. It's that special kind of quality thing. We think we might even go to the other Yehudis, since they do a lot of Torah printing and big book printing, to see whether we can, if Jah will, cut a deal on some business, whether they will serve us. But definitely we'll keep ones and ones up to date on that. The good thing is that much of the digital software, like the IOTA, good software, you have in English, some other Bible software, Amharic Bible softwares, especially those softwares that include like the Strong's Concordance. See, because in order to include the Strong's Concordance, it means that you have to be translating a Bible from the structure of it, not like the NIV or the ISV. These Bibles are free flow Bibles. It's like somebody reads it and then they kind of give their own little flourish to it. So those Bibles are harder for study because it's like somebody read it and they could interpret it, but they give you an interpolation. So you really can't really lock down those key words. But with a lot of the new Amharic software, they do have His Majesty's Bible, right, in there, in the Amharic. And it seems as though the faithful community is using and recognizing, some of the benefits of His Majesty's Bible. It's a very well translated, book, considering, it's Hebrew, the Hebrew roots, as well as the Koine Coptic Greek. But here, brothers and sisters, speaking of that right here, we should rise up right here with today's daily psalm. Today's daily psalm right here. Today's daily psalm is Psalm 66, right? Let's touch on today's daily psalm, Psalm 66. Going to write up the Royal Amharic right here. So first, KJV with some Hebrew highlights.
Psalm 66.
מזמור ס"ו למנצח שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור.
Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands, ye lands, ye lands, ye lands, ye lands.
הריעו לאלוהים כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ.
Sing forth the honor of His name, make His praise glorious. Say unto God, how terrible art thou in thy works. Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves unto thee. All the earth shall worship thee, and shall sing unto thee. They shall sing to thy name. Selah. Come and see the works of God. He is terrible in His doing toward the children of men. He turned the sea into dry land. They went through the flood on foot. There did we rejoice in Him. He ruleth by His power forever. His eyes behold the nations. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. Selah. O bless our God, ye people, and make the voice of His praise to be heard, which holdeth our soul in life, and suffereth not our feet to be moved. For thou, O God, hast proved us. Thou hast tried us as silver is tried. Thou broughtest us into the net. Thou laidst affliction upon our loins. Thou hast caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water, but thou broughtest us out into a wealthy place. I will go into thy house with burnt offerings. I will pay thee my vows, which my lips have uttered, and my mouth hath spoken when I was in trouble. I will offer unto thee burnt sacrifices of fatlings with the incense of rams. I will offer bullocks with goats. Selah. Come and hear, all ye that fear God, and I will declare what He hath done for my soul. I cried unto Him with my mouth, and He was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. But verily God hath heard me. He hath attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which hath not turned away my prayer, nor His mercy from His mercy, 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 from.
Powerful verse right there. If I hold iniquity in my heart, Could this be the reason why sometimes prayers are not heard, are not answered by the true good, the true God? If I hold iniquity in my heart, you do not hear me. That verse, every time I hear Psalm 66, that verse right there, just shining through right there. If I hold iniquity in my heart, in my mind, my meditation, then the true good, the true God is like deaf to me. He does not hear me. And that's a key. It's a key point, because some people say, "Oh, there's no God. I pray to God." But maybe you hold iniquity in your heart. Maybe you don't hear that. And so let's ride up right here, the Royal Amharic right here. Bush chemist, Earth's rightful ruler, native speaker Abraham Chebure. Today's daily Psalm Silfas Sidis 66. Here, Royal Amharic.
መዝሙር 65 በቅንፍ 66 ለመዘምራን አለቃ የመነሳት የምስጋና መዝሙር። በምድር ያላችሁ ሁሉ ለእግዚአብሔር እልል በሉ፣ ለስሙም ዘምሩ፣ ለምስጋናውም ክብርን ስጡ። እግዚአብሔርን እንዲህ በሉ፣ ሥራህ ግሩም ነው፣ ኃይልህ ብዙ ሲሆን ጠላቶች ዋሹብህ። በምድር ያሉ ሁሉ ላንተ ይሰግዳሉ፣ ላንተም ይዘምራሉ፣ ለስምህም ይዘምራሉ። ኑ የእግዚአብሔርንም ሥራ እዩ፣ ከሰው ልጆች ይልቅ በምክር ግሩም ነው። ባህርን የብስ አደረጋት፣ ወንዙንም በእግር ተሻገሩ። በዚያ በእርሱ ደስ ይለናል። በኃይሉ ለዘላለም ይገዛል። ዓይኖቹ ወደ አሕዛብ ይመለከታሉ። አመፀኞች ራሳቸውን ከፍ ከፍ አያድርጉ። አሕዛብ ሆይ አምላካችንን ባርኩ፣ የምስጋናውንም ድምፅ አሰሙ። ነፍሴን በሕይወት ያኖራታል፣ እግሮቼንም ለመናወጥ አልሰጥ። አቤቱ ፈትነኸናልና፣ ብርንም እንደሚያነጥሩት አንጥረኸናልና። ወደ ወጥመድ አገባኸን፣ በጀርባችንም መከራን አኖር። በራሳችን ላይ ሰውን አስረገጥኸን፣ በእሳትና በውሃ መካከል አለፍን፣ ወደ ረፍትም አወጣን። ከሚቃጠል መስዋዕት ጋር ወደ ቤትህ እገባለሁ። በመከራዬ ጊዜ በአፌ የተናገርኩትን ከንፈሮቼም ያሉትን ስለቴን ለአንተ እፈጽማለሁ። ከዕጣንና ከወጠጤዎች ጋር ለሚቃጠል መስዋዕት ፍሪዳን አቀርባለሁ። ላሞችንና ፍየሎችን እሰዋልሃለሁ። እግዚአብሔርን የምትፈሩት ሁሉ ኑ ስሙኝ፣ ለነፍሴ ያደረገላትን ልንገራት። በአፌ ወደ እርሱ ጮኽ፣ በአንደበቴም አመሰገንሁ። በልቤስ በደልን አይቼ ብሆን ጌታ አይሰማኝም ነበር። ስለዚህ እግዚአብሔር ሰማኝ፣ የልመናዬን ድምፅ አደመጠ። ጸሎቴን ያልከለከለኝ ምሕረቱንም ከኔ ያላራቀ እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን።
מזמור ס"ו למנצח שיר מזמור.
Yes. Today's daily Psalm 66. Psalm 66. Let's get a basic overview before we ride up with Amharic here. Okay, Psalm 66. Okay, theme, a song of deliverance, a song of our deliverance. Right here. This here is a psalm, a chant for a safe ending to a national crisis that rings throughout this composition, this poem right here. This is both a song and it's a song. Take note. It's a song and a song, right? Now, some say that it's lacking. What's lacking here is the data that would make it possible to determine the occasion with any degree of certainty. So in looking at today's daily psalms, some psalms, it's clear to see where these psalms really rise up within the Hebrew historical narrative. We can link many psalms. Many of the psalms can be linked to times of David, even overtly in the superscription. Here it just says, for the leader, for the chief musician, Lanatea Shir Mizmor, a shir, a song, and a mizmor, a chant. So this chant here is for a safe ending to a national crisis that rings throughout the composition. But what's lacking is the data, right, that would make it possible to determine the occasion with any degree of certainty. However, there are features in common with other psalms, with other chants, with other, as I and Rastafari say, aya's praises, that celebrated the defeat of Assyria's forces, the Assyrian forces. And it's probably to be included in that group. All right. So there are some psalms that regard the historical Assyrian, right, Osirian, Ashurian, forces in crisis. Now, it's interesting because even here is where we apply the metaphysics. So there's two types, two truths, right? The law, the Hebrew law, the two truths. Mainly there is the outer and there's the inner. There's the earthly type, there's the heavenly type. There's the 5 cycle, the physical type, to the natural type, and then there's the more spiritual, the metaphysical type, right? So here, in looking at Assyria, let's look at the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. For a moment, describing the hard copy right here, right? So we can apply this besides, in the time, the Syrians were forces that was down on the Israelites, and the Israelites were fighting against them, and there was times of national crisis, almost tottering on defeat, right? So they were physical 5-cycle enemies known as the Assyrians. But Assyria, like Egypt, is very interesting because according to the prophet, Jehovah says that Egypt is my people. Assyria is the work of my hands. And Yisrael, Yasharallah, Yisrael, he says, is mine inheritance. So even there, according to the prophet Yeshayahu, prophet Isaiah the prophet, he says, Egypt is my people, Mitzrayim is my people, Ami. Assyria is the work of my hands, and Yisrael is mine inheritance. Right? So Assyria, what's the basic of Assyria? Right? So the authorized version, the AV in some places has Assur. So we sometimes say the Assyrian, the Osirian, the Assyrian, Assyrian, from Ashur. Interesting, when they say Ashur, right? Assyrian, right? The Hebrew is Ashur, the country of Ashur. The definitions are the same as those for Ashur. Ashur, Asshur. Ashur, same as Assyria. So here, at one time, Assyria was a very mighty empire. Oh, it was a good question. The reason with Honorable Priest Isaac. And, ones will say like Mitzrayim, ancient Egypt, and I mentioned also Assyria in the reasoning in the Tiger's Den. They are all older civilization. Yeah, they're way older. Israel is like the youths. Israel, in comparison, when Israel becomes a nation to those ancient great nations, of course, it's almost like now we'll say like the elders should give way to the youth. Don't we hear that reasoning a lot? Now think about it in the context of Israel being the youngest of the nations at that time. So at one time, speaking about Assyria, a very mighty empire, it was overthrown by the Babylonians and the Medes about 600 BC, after it had been in existence for some 1,200 years or 1,200 years. See, this was a great thing about the true study the Shu also approved, right? In Yahweh, we actually going into historical data, right? Not just looking at this as a religious book, as some would, right? But looking at also the history, right? Based on studying it, right? not according to a religious. See, the religious folks will basically just accept whatever the pastor says. But no, when we come across Assyria, we say, who's Assyria? What's this Assyria about? Assyria was an enemy of Israel in what way? Well, Nineveh, remember Nineveh? Nineveh, doesn't that have something to do with Jonah? The whole Jonah story where Jonah ran away. He didn't want to preach to these people because he wasn't Israelites. So he tried to go to Spain, to Tarshish, right? And he got all caught up and got swallowed up by a big whale or fish or something like that, right? And then finally he did what he was supposed to do. But Nineveh, remember Jonah? Nineveh was the capital of ancient Assyria. At the time of its greatest power, Assyria included many of the countries that we read about in the Bible. All right, so the real history, right? We have Assyria, including many of the countries that we read about here, even in the scriptures, like Babylonia, Media, all right? Not the media, but the other media, the original media, Chaldea, right? The Chaldean or Chaldea, Armenia, right? Syria, Palestine, Phoenicia, Idumea, so you have the Edomites and others, besides Assyria proper. So in the scripts, you can go to Genesis 25:18, 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 3-6, Prophet Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 13. Interesting. Chapter 2, verse 13, that Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 12 said, ye Ethiopians also shall be slain by my sword. That's Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 12. And the next verse it mentions Assyria. All in the family? Well, the metaphysical of this here, Assyria represents now taking on the higher level, now getting into the spiritual warfare level of it. All right. The first is dealing with the temporal warfare. All right. Now here looking at the spiritual warfare, looking at from the 5 cycle, the physical here to the metaphysical. Assyria, what does Assyria represent? Ashur represents the reasonings. Ashur, Assyria represents the philosophical. Ashur, Assyria in the Hebrew metaphysics represents the psychical that do not recognize the spiritual head of the universe. Once again, Assyria would represent the reasonings, the philosophical, the psychical, that does not recognize the spiritual Rosh HaOlamim, the head of the universe, the Ras of the Universe, the universal Rastafari, but are based upon sense observation, based upon sense observation, the 5 foolish versions, right? Not the 5 wise, upon the formed instead of the formless, upon the formed instead of the formless. Such thoughts are destructive and undisciplined. If a man keeps his attention fixed on spirit, on the iris, on the innermost of the innocence, he is protected, guided, protected from materialism, schism, that is constantly encroaching up on his consciousness. But if he worships the so-called mysterious and the so-called hidden, the occult, or if he reasons wholly, completely from the appearances of the senses, what appears to be the outer world, he defeats the protective action of the higher law, the higher Torah, the Torah of the iris, the spirit of life, and he falls and fails into the hands of the Assyrians. The Assyrians. To pay tribute to the Assyrians, we have this in 2 Kings chapter 15, verses 19-20. All right. What does this mean, Havari? This is to make concessions. When you make concessions, you compromise to the unregenerate. You compromise to the unregenerate, even to the degenerates, the material realm of consciousness in us that they represent. When the spiritual, the higher understanding and understanding predominates in one, the mental realm that Assyria signifies is redeemed. So here it says that when the spiritual, the iritical understanding, the understanding predominates in one, the mental realm, one's mental realm, which is represented here according to the metaphysics by Assyria, what Assyria signifies is redeemed. Is redeemed right here. Now, it's interesting because we should have went to Ashur, because we had Assyria right there, but now getting to the root of Assyria is Ashur. Asar, Ashur, right? Ashur in the Hebrew means a step. Ashur means level, ongoing, level, like we said, level vibes. Ashur means straightforward. Ashur, in Hebrew meaning, means observation of laws, of Torah, of direction instructions. Ashur means harmonious. Ashur also, like we say, Asher, right? Ashur means gracious. Asher, Ashrei means happy. Ashur means on level place, level vibe, a plane. Ashur means a step. A mighty hero, like a mighty one in ancient times, like a Gibor, or like a hero in ancient times, was also referred to as Ashur. We link the Ashur, right, etymologically, and Asar, as some would say, we link that in the ancient etymology. There's a link. And even the fact that Ashur also was one way of referring in ancient times to like a mighty one, or one who was a hero. He was like a Asar, Ashur. Now, he was a son of Shem, the country also of Assyria, right? In Numbers chapter 24, verse 22, and Ezekiel 27, 23. Now, here, directly to the metaphysical, metaphysical, Ashur here, Assyria representing the mental realm, applying the metaphysics. Ashur here, getting to the root, represents the intellectual or the mental reasoning. So who are the Assyrians? So when we apply now the psalm, we weaponize the psalm to the spiritual warfare. If this is now directed against the Assyrians, it's directed against the so-called intellectual, right? The mental, the intellectual, like some try to like use intellectual, right, to kind of subvert the iritical, the spiritual reasoning. You know what I mean? Oh, that's spiritual. Everything has to be material, right? But then look at man. Man is physical, right? He is material, but the real life of him is not seen. The real spirit of him, the real soul, even our thoughts, we see it, but the other person doesn't see it until we manifest it in the 5 cycle. So Assyria come from Ashur. Ashur is the intellectual, mental reasoning. This is the intellectual plane in man is Assyria, Ashur. In its progress, in its what? In its progress. Remember, Ashur means step. In its progress toward the spiritual, or in its upliftment, in its union to Wahido, in its union with true spiritual understanding, understanding, overstanding. Therefore, Ashur means a step. Ashur means level, ongoing. Ashur, in the basic Hebrew, means straightforward. Ashur is observation of Torot, observation of laws, direction, instruction. In Isaiah, Yeshaya, in Isaiah the prophet, Isaiah chapter 19, verses 23 to 25, what do we read? We read that Egypt, Kemet, if you please, or Mitzrayim, Ashur, Assyria, and Yisrael, Yasharala, shall all worship the true El, Ha'el, Hayel, Hailahim, the true power, together, and shall be a baraka, a blessing, a word, an invocation of prosperity and increase in the midst of the earth. These three, from Isaiah chapter 19, verses 23 to 25, speaking of Egypt, Assyria, and Israel, these three, they represent the Trinity, the triunity in man, namely the body, the soul or mental realm, and the spirit. The body, the groundation, Kemet, the body, Mitzrayim, right? The soul, the psyche, the psychical, the mental, Ashur, Assyria, and the spiritual, Yisrael, Yasharala, all united and unified, Mawahad, Tawahido, in truth, and redeemed so as to express spiritually for the good of the entire man, the entire human being, the entirety of humanity. Mitzrayim, Egypt, the Hikapatat, Hekapata, Egypta. Egypt, Kemet, refers to the body. Assyria to the mental realm or the so-called intellect. And Yisrael to the spirit. So here, just to bring this out and kind of just connect the dots. And I want to say, oh, well, that's just the Bible there. Well, I can show you a manifest of that. The true church and the professing churches, the Ethiopian, the Tewahedo church, the sister churches are 5. What are the 5 sister churches that come out of that true, we say Judeo-Coptic, that true Christ man root? It's the Ethiopian church, the Egyptian, the Coptic church, the Assyrian church, the Armenian church, and the Indian church. And one would say, well, where's Israel? The Israelites of Ethiopia, the Ark of the Covenant, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So we can see this manifest even right here, right? When we recognize, well, who's who being spoken about right here. Egypt, the Coptic church, Assyria. From Assyria came the 9 saints of Ethiopia, the 9 saints, also a sister church. The Syriac and Assyrian is also one of our linguistics, right? And Yisrael. David had a son named Solomon. Solomon had a son named David who renewed the kingdom of David in the tops of the mountains. Psalm 87, verse 4. With Ethiopia, this man was born there. Amos 9 and 7. Are you not as the children of the Ethiopians? So we point to the scripts, but we're also pointing to real world manifests, right? To show that this is not just allegorical. Yes, there's an aspect that's allegorical. And then when it's manifest, it is the fullness. Yes, I. So here, brothers and sisters and brothers, here, let's ride up with this right here, coming into that time right here. Once again, without the music, right, the background, today's daily psalm. Very, very important psalm here. Oh, pray to I. I had took a little kind of segue right there. So concerning today's daily psalm, a song of deliverance, a song of victory. These features are common with other psalms that we have in today's psalm that celebrates the defeat of the Assyrian forces. So on the spiritual level, in the spiritual warfare, this is the defeat of the pseudo-intellectualism schism. One's trying to go mental against our children. And it is probably to be included in that group. There's a peculiarity of the psalm, today's daily psalm, Psalm 66, Mizmor Samek Wow, right? There's a peculiarity in the chant, is the use of the plural. We have the use of the plural, like not just I, but the I and I, not just me, but we sense. Up to the end of verse 12. So if you notice the peculiarity as you look over the verses, there's the we sense, there's the I and I sense, there's I and I Rastafari, there's that we sense up until we get to the end of verse 12. And the subsequent change to the singular, to the I. So first it begins as I, and then it seals up with the singularity, the I. On the hypothesis, right, that the psalm, the chant, it relates to the overthrow of one named Sennacherib and Sennacherib's army, it has been suggested that the individual in the last section is King Hezekiah. So when one's look at the historical narrative in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Kings, as it's better known, 1st, 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings, and also Chronicles that also retells the basic narrative. We look at today's psalm and that individual speaking in the I sense. Many say that as Hezekiah, because Hezekiah was on that front line with concerning Sennacherib and the Assyrians. Others have drawn attention to the claim of integrity. There's a claim of integrity in verse 18. And this is said to have a close parallel. This parallels what King Hezekiah uttered in Isaiah chapter 38 and 3. So we come to verse 18 where it says, if I had regarded iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not hear. If I regard iniquity, awen im raiti belibi, awen, or modern Hebrew, aven im raiti velibi. if I regard it, here it says awain or avein, avon, avein, moral perversity, iniquity, twistedness. If raiti, if I had seen, raiti in the Hebrew from ra'eh, to see, raiti means if I had seen moral perversion, belibi, in my heart, to say like in my mind, lo yishma Adonai, lo yishma Adonai, lo yishma, lo not yishma, yishma, he to hear, Adonai, Adonai would not hear. So many look at this particular verse here as bringing out what King Hezekiah said, right? Because he was on the front lines with the Syrians and Sennacherib at that time in Isaiah chapter 38, verse 3. Iniquity in my heart. He was emboldened to pray and praise because he knew that he was innocent of wrongdoing. And the attacker was completely evil, rah-rah, ratchet, unkind. Yes. So here, brothers and sisters, just to give an overview of today's daily psalm, to look at the historical context as well, and elsewhere in the scripture. In other words, to rightly divide, it says to rightly divide the word. To rightly divide the word mean that, okay, you see over here in this psalm right here, this links with Hezekiah over here in Isaiah, as well as what was happening to Syria and Israel over here in Kings, so we can get a full picture. Yes, I. So the Royal Heart right here, brothers and sisters, hear this.
መዝሙር 65 በቅንፍ 66 ለመዘምራን አለቃ የመነሳት የምስጋና መዝሙር። በምድር ያላችሁ ሁሉ ለእግዚአብሔር እልል በሉ፣ ለስሙም ዘምሩ፣ ለምስጋናውም ክብርን ስጡ። እግዚአብሔርን እንዲህ በሉት፣ ሥራህ ግሩም ነው፣ ኃይልህ ብዙ ሲሆን ጠላቶች ዋሹብህ። በምድር ያሉ ሁሉ ላንተ ይሰግዳሉ፣ ላንተም ይዘምራሉ፣ ለስምህም ይዘምራሉ። ኑ የእግዚአብሔርንም ሥራ እዩ፣ ከሰው ልጆች ይልቅ በምክር ግሩም ነው። ባህርን የብስ አደረጋት፣ ወንዙንም በእግር ተሻገሩ። በዚያ በእርሱ ደስ ይለናል። በኃይሉ ለዘላለም ይገዛል። ዓይኖቹ ወደ አሕዛብ ይመለከታሉ። አመፀኞች ራሳቸውን ከፍ ከፍ አያድርጉ። አሕዛብ ሆይ አምላካችንን ባርኩ፣ የምስጋናውንም ድምፅ አሰሙ። ነፍሴን በሕይወት ያኖራታል፣ እግሮቼንም ለመናወጥ አልሰጠም። አቤቱ ፈትነኸናልና፣ ብርንም እንደሚያነጥሩት አንጥረኸናልና። ወደ ወጥመድ አገባኸን፣ በጀርባችንም መከራን አኖር። በራሳችን ላይ ሰውን አስረገጥኸን፣ በእሳትና በውሃ መካከል አለፍን፣ ወደ ረፍትም አወጣኸን። ከሚቃጠል መሥዋዕት ጋር ወደ ቤትህ እገባለሁ። በመከራዬ ጊዜ በአፌ የተናገርኩትን ከንፈሮቼም ያሉትን ስለቴን ላንተ ፈጽማለሁ። ከዕጣንና ከወጠጤዎች ጋር ለሚቃጠል መሥዋዕት ፍሪዳን አቀርባለሁ። ላሞችንና ፍየሎችን እሰዋልሃለሁ። እግዚአብሔርን የምትፈሩት ሁሉ ኑ ስሙኝ፣ ለነፍሴ ያደረገላትን ልንገራችሁ። በአፌ ወደ እርሱ ጮኽሁ፣ በአንደበቴም አመሰገንሁ። በልቤስ በደልን አይቼ ብሆን ጌታ አይሰማኝም ነበር። ስለዚህ እግዚአብሔር ሰማኝ፣ የልመናዬን ድምፅ አደመጠ። ጸሎቴን ያልከለከለኝ ምሕረቱንም ከኔ ያላራቀ እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን።
እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን. The sustainer be praised. Yes, sir. Rastafari, እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን. So here, verse by verse, today's daily song. Right here.
Teach me, teacher. Teach high and I am a teacher.
Hier sehen wir Chibret Miskana of Chibret chibret, of unity, of Mizmor Silsa Amis Silsa Sidist. Mizmore Dawid. Psalm 66. Le mezamrana leka. Ye menesat. Ye miskana. Mizmor. Today's daily psalm, according to the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews, and here from the Metzaf Kedus, from the authorized, revised Amharic Bible, the Book of the Seven Seals, we have Mezmor Silsa Sidist. Here's theme Ye Chibret Miskana, of Chibret, of unity, of community, Chibret, solidarity, Miskana, praises, Ises of solidarity, Chibret, Miskana. Here, Sema, here, Rastafari, here. According to the Book of the Seven Seals, the Metzaf Kedus, today's daily psalm. Now, today's daily psalm is themed, the Ibrayist in the Hebrew, and according to the Hebraic, today's daily psalm is themed the Song of Deliverance. We have Yechibret Miskana, of the Chibret, of the unity, community, togetherness, solidarity, Yechibret Miskana. Here we have the superscription, Lemezamrana Leka, Ye Menesat, Ye Miskana Mezmor. In the English, we have, to the chief musician, a song or psalm. Now, here in the Psalms of David, in our parallel Bible containing the KJV and the HSV, the Haile Selassie version, we have a footnote here next to Ye Menesat, Ye Menesat, Ye Menesat, Ye Menesat. Ye Menesat being translated as of or relating to the rising up or the getting up. The sense here from the Royal Amharic manuscript is the same as the Hebraic word aliyah, the aliyah, as used in the Judaic mikorab, called the synagogues, the gathering together to gather rites and rituals. However, this can be taken as a morning psalm, a psalm in the morning, tuat, mezmor, or a thanksgiving praise for the individual and the community, Yechibret Miskana. Note this superscription is not found in the KJV, the King James Version, or the Hebrew Sefer Tehillim, the Hebrew Psalter. But here, superscription, Le mezamrana leka, to the chief musician, La menatziyach, Ye menesat, of the uprising, the rising up, the getting up, salutation in that sense. Ye miskana, of praise, of thanksgiving, mezmor, the Royal Amharic mezmor corresponding to the Hebraic mizmor. Mizmor in the Hebraic, in the Hebrew mizmor. Here the Royal Amharic mezmor from the zemre, the zamar, the chant, to chant sense. Here. Besma ab, walid, wamenses kedus, ahadu amlak. Mezmor Dawit, silsa mis, silsa sidist. Le mezamrana leka, ye menesat, ye miskana mezmor. To the chief musician, le mezamrana leka, Ye menesat, of the uprising, the salutation. Ye miskana mezmor, a song or song. Quran, verse 1. Bemidr yalachu hullu le egziavihir ilal bellu. Make a joyful noise to egziavihir, to sustain of the good, the generous, the open-handed Father. Le egziavihir ilal bellu. Make a joyful noise to Egziavihir, all ye lands. Bemidr yalachu hulu, in the lands, all of y'all that are in the lands. Le Egziavihir, this corresponds here with the Hebrew, the Hebraic, ha-ri'u le'elohim, call ha'aretz, shout, ha-ri'u le'elohim, call ha'aretz. Bamarinya, the Metzaf Kedus, the Midar Yalachu Hulu, Le Gziavihir Ilil Bellu. Kutar Hulet, verse 2. Le Smuma Zemru, Le Miskanawima Kubrina Situ. Sing forth the honor of his name. Le Smum Zemru. Le Smum, to Semu, his name. Le Smum, and to his name. Le Smum Zemru. Chant Isis to the honor of his name. Le miskanawum kubrin situ. Le miskanawum kubrin situ. Make his praise, his
Isis, his miskana, le miskanawum, miskana, thanks, praise, miskanao, his thanks, his praise, le miskanawum, and for his thanks, his praise, kubrin, situ, honor, situ, give honor, give glory for his praise, le miskanawum, kubrin, situ, kuter, source, verse 3. Egziavi harinna india belut. Sera grumno chayle bizu sihon telatocha washube. Say to Egziavi, how to sustain the good, the generous, open-handed arm. Indeed, belut, like this, say, Egziavi harin, indeed, belut. Say y'all like this to Egziavi har. How terrible art thou in thy works. Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves to thee. I, ma'am, Serah, Garumno, Chayleh, Bizu Sihon, Elatoch, Washube. It's interesting right here. Bamarinya says Serah, work, Serah, Sahey, Serah, Garumno. You're speaking directly to he who be, the I work, Serah, Garum. It is majestic. Garum, like Garmawi, Garum, no. It is majestic. Serah, Garum, no. Chayleh, and thy power, Bizu, Sihon, Bizu, Nuff, it being Nuff, while the I Chayl, the I power, Chayleh, Bizu Sihon, while the eye's power being Nuff, Elatoch, the enemies, the Elatoch, the enemies, the haters, Washube, they lie against the eye while the eye Chayleh, Bizu Sihon, Elatoch, Washube, Kuter Arat, verse 4. The Midr Hulu, Laante Yisegdalu, Laantem Yizamralu. Lesimehima Yizamralu. KJV has here for Kutararat, verse 4. All the earth shall worship the eye. The Midr Yalu Hulu. In the earth, in the Midr Yalu, they who are Hulu all. Leante, to the eye male, Yisegdalu. They shall prostrate, they shall worship. Leantem, and to the ante, to the eye male, leantem, Yizamralu. And shall sing and shall chant Isis, La'antem Yizamralu, Lesimehim, and to the I male name, Lesimeh, Sim, name Simeh, the I name, Lesimeh, to the I name, Lesimehim, and to the I's name, Yizamralu, they shall chant Isis to the I's name. Now the Hebrew here would be a Selah, a pause. Kuter Amis, verse 5. No, Egziavi harinim, Saraiu, Kasol Jochi Yilik, the Mikr Grumno. No, Egziavi harinim, Saraiu, Kasol Jochi Yilika, the Mikr Grumno. Come and see the works of Egziavi the sustainer. He is terrible in his doing toward the children of men. Here, Bamarin in the Metzav Kedus, the book of the seven seals, here at Kutaramis. No, come. Yeah, Geziavi Harinema Sarah. You. See the work, the Sarah of Geziavi her. Kasol Lijoch Yilik, from the children of man, the children of humanity, more than the children of humanity. Kasol Lijoch Yilik. The mikr, in advice and counsel, but mikr, garumno. He is majestic. He is terrible. He is majestic. Garum, from the root garama, as if garmawi hoy, his majesty. The mikr, advice. The mikr, garumno. Kuter sedis, verse 6. Bahirina yabissa darregata wanzunim begara teshagaru bezia barsu tesa. He turned the sea into the dry. Bahir sea. Bahirina yabs adarregat. He made the sea the dry. Bahirin yabsa adarregat. Interesting here as well. When we look at the Hebrew here, corresponding hafakayam li yabasha, yabasha. Pamarini with the yebis yabasha yebs. Bahirina yebsa regat. Wanzunema begur teshagaru. Bezia bersu desilanan. They went through the flood on foot. They went through the rivers, Wenzu, river, Wenzunim, and the river, Be'igr, by foot, Be'igr, Teshagaru. They crossed the river, Be'igr, Wenzunim, Be'igr, Teshagaru. Bezia Be'rusu Desilena. There did we rejoice in him. There did we, I and I, Bezia, there, Be'rusu in him, Desilena. Desilena, we were happy, we rejoiced, Desilena. Kutar Sabat, verse 7. I know chua word ahzab yimelekatalu. Amet enyo charasacho win kef kefa ayadargu. Rasacho win kef kefa ayadargu. Behailu lezlam yigezal. He ruleth by his power forever, forever. Behailu, by his power, in his power, lezelalem, forever. Yigezal, he rule. I know true what ahizab yimelekatalu. His eyes behold the nations. I know true. His eyes were dead toward ahizab, the peoples, the nations, the international community. Yimelekatalu. They pay attention. They observe, they behold, they pay attention. Melekatalu. Amet enyo charasachuin kef ayadrugu. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. Amet enyo, the rebels rasacho, their heads rasachuin kef ayadrugu. Don't let them kef lift up their heads. Here, Hebraically, we have a diasama, Selah, pause. Kuter cement, verse 8. Ahzab hoy, amlakachinin, barku. Yemiskanawenema dinsa, asemu. Oh, bless amlakachin, our source. Ye peoples, ye Gentiles, ye nations, nationality. Ahzab hoy, oh peoples, ahzab hoy, amlakachinin, barku. And make the voice of his praise, his miskana. The voice, the sound of his praise. Cause it to be heard. Verse 9. Nafsin bahiweta ya noratal. Igaroche nema lemenawet al setem. Who holdeth our soul in life, nefse. Here it has my soul, the singular, not our. Here in the Royal Hark it says nefse. Not nefsachin, we ours over here in the midst of kedus of negus neges at kuter zetain. It says nefse, my soul. But he wet in life and liberty. Ya noratal. He holdeth. He causes it to be. He causes her, my soul, my psyche to be. But he wet in life. Igrochenim, and my feet. Igrochenim. Lemenawet al setem, has not given my feet to be moved. Kuter Aser, verse 10. Avetu. Fetenehenalena. Burnim and the miya netruta. For thou the I abetu, I father's father, father the house, abetu, fetenehenalena, has proved I and I, fetenehenalena, the I male, abetu, I father's father, father the house, has proved I and I. Burnim in the miyayanetruta, anitrehenalena, thou hast tried I and I as silver, Burnim and the miyanet ruta nit rehenalena, as silver is tried. Kutarasaraan, verse 11. Wada wet meda gebahen, bejerbachnema mekrana nore. Thou broughtest us, I and I, into the net. Wada wet meda gebahen. Thou the eye laid affliction upon I loins, bejerbachinim, jerba back, bejerbachinim, and upon I back, mekran, trouble, anore, thou hast laid affliction upon I backs. Utarasara hulet, verse 12. Berasachin laya sowin, asa regetehen. Besatina be wucham mekatela lefin. Wode reftema wetahen. Thou hast caused men to ride over Ainai heads. Berasachin lai, sowin asa regetehen. Thou hast caused men to ride over our head. Rasachin lai, the rasachin lai. Sowin asa regetehen. We went through fire and through water. Be'isatina, be'wucha alefin. We passed through the Isat and through the wucha. Be'isatina, be'wucha alefin. But thou, the eye, broughtest us, I out into a wealthy place. What a reftima with our hand. What a reft to rest. What a towards reftim and towards rest. What a reftima with our hand. The eye male causes I to come out into rest. Kutarocha Asara sources ki Asara rat here. We have two verses. Mamarinya as one verse, verses 13 and 14. Kamik at ella meswa itagara wada beitehe gabalo. The mekraye gize baafeya yete nagarahutina kenna forochema yalutina siletena lante if it's malo. I will go into thy house with burnt offerings. I will pay thee, I, male, my vows, that my lips have uttered and my mouth have spoken when I was in trouble. Kamik atel meswait gar, with burnt offerings. Kamik atel, that which is burnt, meswait, offerings gar with. Kamik atel meswait gar, wada beiteh, gabalo. I will enter wada beiteh, into the I bait, I house, wada beiteh, gabalo. The mekraye gize, the afe yet nagaruhutina can ferochim yalutina siletin leante if it's malo. I will pay thee, I, my vows that my lips have uttered, and my mouth has spoken, that my lips have uttered, and my mouth has spoken when I was in trouble. The mekraye gize, in my time of mekara, of trials and tribulation. The mekraye, my trials and tribulation. The mekraye gize, in my time of trials and tribulation. The afe yetanagarohutin, with my the afe, with my mouth, yetanagarohutin, that which I spoke with my mouth, ken ferochim yalutin, and my lips, that which was my siletin, my vow, my siletin, leante, to the eye male, if it's malo, I will perform, I will fulfill to the eye my vow, siletin, leante, if it's malo. Kutar asara mis, verse 15. Ka itana ka watetewo chigara lemia katela meswa ita fridana carvalho la mochna fielochina sewalhalo. I will offer to the eye, male, burnt sacrifices of fatlings with the incense, the ancients of rams. I will offer bullocks with goats. Here a diasoma, a selah. Ka itana, with Aishans, the itan, ka itana of Aishans, ka weteteo chigara, le mikat elemeswa ita fridana carvalho, la mochna fielochine sewalhalo. Kutarasara sidis, verse 16. Egziavi harina yemita faruto hulu, nu. Smunye lenefseya yadareglatina lingarachu. Come, hear, all ye, all y'all that fear, that reverence, that respect. Egziavi herina yemita farut hulu nu come. Smunye, here I, nu come. Smunye, here I. Lenese ya de regalatina lingaracho, and I will declare what he hath done for my soul. Lenese ya de regalatina lingaracho. Kutarasara Savat, verse 17. The afe woda rusua chohu. Beandebetema amesagina amesagenut amesagenhut amesagenhut. I cried to him with mouth, and he was extolled, he was praised, he was extolled. Amesagenhut. I misguided him, I thanked him, I praised him. Beandebete, with my style of speech. Beafe, what else? In my mouth, by way of afe, my mouth, beafe, order toward Arsu, him, chohuhu, chohuhu. I cried, I shouted to him, bafe, what Arsu, chohu, bandebete, my mesagenhut, and he was praised, extolled with my style of speech, my andebet, bandebete, my mesagenhut. Kutarasara cement, verse 18. Belbesa bedelina aiche behon. Geta ayasamanyim neber. If I regard iniquity in my heart, Geta, the self-constrained, restrained, the Lord, Geta, will not hear me. Adonai will not hear I. Belbes in my heart, bedelin, wrong, hurt, wrongdoing, bedelin, belbes in my heart. Bedelin aiche, if I see aiche behon, if I'm seeing wrong in my heart, belebes, bedelin aiche behon, if I'm seeing regarding iniquity in my heart, seeing wrong in my heart, belebes, bedelin aiche behon, geta, aisemanyim neber, geta, the Lord will not hear, Adonai, Donai will not hear, I. Kutarasara zeteng. Verse 19. Silazi, Egziabi Semain, Yeliminayin Dimsa Demete. But verily, Exavier hath, he have heard I. Silazi, therefore, Exavier Semain, Yeliminayin Dimsa Demete. He hath attended, paid attention to the voice of my prayer. To my request, my beseeching, ye limenayin dims, to the voice of my supplication, my limena, ye limenayin dimsa demete, silazi, exavia samanya, ye limenayin dimsa demete, kutar haya, verse 20. Selotin. Yala kalekalenya mihiretu nima kaneya yalarake egziavihir yimesken. Selotina yala kalekaleng mihiretu nima kaneya yalarake egziavihir yimesken. Blessed be egziavihir, sustain the good, generous, open-handed Father, egziavihir yimesken, who hath not turned away my prayer. Selotin, yal kalekaleng, selote, my prayers, selotin, yal kalekaleng, mihiretu nim, kene yalarake, nor his mercy, mihiretu nim, and his mercy, ka inne, from I, yalarake, it is not far, his mercy is not far from my mihiretu nema kane yalarake exavihar yimesken
Teach me, teacher. Teach I and I am a teacher. Teach me, teacher. Teach I and I am a teacher. Let them message, Jaja. Rastafari. King of all kings, Lord of all lords, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, elect of himself, my intention, the rebel exhibit, massacre, Yahweh, the goose and the gods, let shall be praised.
Legashun, Agarashun, Legashun, Zenigashwe, Ethiopia Menage, you know. But we want the next verse with Amharic. But we want the next verse with Amharic. In the line, because we want the song to reach that men gets to realize people out there know what are going on. You know, because we want to ask them if we want to sell out the black people to the Russians. Then he will fight against America. You know. But His Majesty will never join America or Russia. Although they look closer to America because so much black people in America. So it must closer to America because I'm having people. You know, just as easy as that. So people still searching for this truth here, which this reggae music, you know, bring across to them, and the only purpose it serves is to tell the people about Rastafari.
Once again, today's daily psalm. Let's just hear the native speaker wanting to share another audible, but audible don't seem to be there. Just a plain read right here. Today's daily psalm. Xavier Mescan. SI.
Psalm 66.
מזמור ס"ו למנצח שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור.
መዝሙር 65 በቅንፍ 66 ለመዘምራን አለቃ የመነሳት የምስጋና መዝሙር። በምድር ያላችሁ ሁሉ ለእግዚአብሔር እልል በሉ፣ ለስሙም ዘምሩ፣ ለምስጋናውም ክብርን ስጡ። እግዚአብሔርን እንዲህ በሉት፣ ሥራህ ግሩም ነው፣ ኃይልህ ብዙ ሲሆን ጠላቶች ዋሹብህ። በምድር ያሉ ሁሉ ላንተ ይሰግዳሉ፣ ላንተም ይዘምራሉ፣ ለስምህም ይዘምራሉ። ኑ የእግዚአብሔርንም ሥራ እዩ፣ ከሰው ልጆች ይልቅ በምክር ግሩም ነው። ባህርን የብስ አደረጋት፣ ወንዙንም በእግር ተሻገሩ። በዚያ በእርሱ ደስ ይለናል። በኃይሉ ለዘላለም ይገዛል። ዓይኖቹ ወደ አሕዛብ ይመለከታሉ። አመፀኞች ራሳቸውን ከፍ ከፍ አያድርጉ። አሕዛብ ሆይ አምላካችንን ባርኩ፣ የምስጋናውንም ድምፅ አሰሙ። ነፍሴን በሕይወት ያኖራታል፣ እግሮቼንም ለመናወጥ አልሰጠም። አቤቱ ፈትነኸናልና፣ ብርንም እንደሚያነጥሩት አንጥረኸናልና። ወደ ወጥመድ አገባኸን፣ በጀርባችንም መከራን አኖር። በራሳችን ላይ ሰውን አስረገጥኸን፣ በእሳትና በውሃ መካከል አለፍን፣ ወደ ረፍትም አወጣኸን። ከሚቃጠል መሥዋዕት ጋር ወደ ቤትህ እገባለሁ። በመከራዬ ጊዜ በአፌ የተናገርኩትን ከንፈሮቼም ያሉትን ስለቴን ላንተ እፈጽማለሁ። ከዕጣንና ከወጠጤዎች ጋር ለሚቃጠል መሥዋዕት ፍሪዳን አቀርባለሁ። ላሞችንና ፍየሎችን እሰዋልሃለሁ። እግዚአብሔርን የምትፈሩት ሁሉ ኑ ስሙኝ፣ ለነፍሴ ያደረገላትን ልንገራችሁ። በአፌ ወደ እርሱ ጮኽሁ፣ በአንደበቴም አመሰገንሁ። በልቤስ በደልን አይቼ ብሆን ጌታ አይሰማኝም ነበር። ስለዚህ እግዚአብሔር ሰማኝ፣ የልመናዬን ድምፅ አደመጠ። ጸሎቴን ያልከለከለኝ ምሕረቱንም ከኔ ያላራቀ እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን።
Baruch Elohim, blessed be Elohim, highlight him. So here in today's song of deliverance, Psalm 66. First 4 verses, a call to humanity to praise the sustainer, to praise, highlight him. Verses 5 to 7, Elohim, Exhiabit, the sustainers, mighty deeds. Mighty deeds in verses 8 to 12 is thanksgiving, miskana. On the Hebrew, Tawada, Toda, miskana, thanks and praise for deliverance, And here in verses 13 to 15, the king, this part of the psalm is seen, the king discharges his vows, verses 13 to 15. And according to one view of today's daily psalm, right, let's look at the superscription right here. Right, notice that the superscription doesn't say of David. So some say that this is Hezekiah, right? Hezekiah, because of Isaiah chapter 38, verse 3, right? So the king here, we can look at this as King Hezekiah, right, within the context of the Hebrew scripts here. In verses 16 to 20, his testimony to Exhiabit to sustain his aid. There's a verse right here. It's verse 16 where it says, come. New. In them hard to say new is like come all of you. New. Right? Samu, new. Come and hearken and hear. All y'all that feel that reverence, that respect, all y'all that reverence for I, Exhiabit, and I will declare what he have done for my soul. Right here, you will extol, right? When it speaks about extolling, right? Extolling him in verse 17. I cried, I called out, I shouted out to him with my mouth, word, sound, power. And he was extolled with my tongue. Here, looking to the Hebrew, about to ride up into the Hebrew here for this part of the verse, and he was extolled with my tongue. Now, when we bring this out from the Hebrew, with Romam Tahat Le Shoni, with and Romam, like to big up, so to make it Ram, with Romam and bigged up and lifted up, bigged up. Tahat is similar to Tahut. Talking about that with Moshe, when it said that Moshe was made a Elohim to Paro, to Pharaoh, to great house in Mitzrayim. We postulate based on the Ethiopic text and the context that was Tahut, or some say thought. But the word sound in Afro-Shemitic, we have Tahat. Tahat in the Hebrew corresponds to Tehut. And even in one form of like humbleness, humility, Tehitana, right? So we have Tahat. But here the Hebrew means under, right? The sense of under. With Romam and bigging up Tahat under Lishoni, under my tongue. Here more literally bringing it out, and high praise, high Isis was under my tongue, right? So looking at the Hebrew here, I called out to him with my mouth, and the high praise, the high Isis was under my tongue. And we brought forward that sense of the Elilta. Like we say, hallelujah, right? Yah is to say, praise Yah, praise Jah, praise he who be. But the actual act of the hallelujah is retained even among the Israelites of Ethiopia, the true church and the professing church, the Ethiopian Tawahedo church, with that word sound, that ililta, that the ililta, the ilil, like it's like a word sound of bigging up, exaltation. And then the note here is that prayer was mingled with praise. That prayer, even prayer right here, prayer is mingled, right? It's mingled, made one, mingled with praise because of the certainty that he would answer. The very interesting principle here. Sometimes we'll pray, right? And sometimes they praise, right? But prayer here, we note this in the Psalms, particularly in the Psalms, were like the liturgy, like the Kedash, the holy service for Yisrael, especially the Psalms of David, of a man after Yahweh's own heart. And we see other Psalms that come in the style of David, in that Davidic style as well, that true Hebrew root style, also building on that principle. So we're getting certain precepts here where prayer, that which we are maybe asking for, petitioning, is mingled with Isis. I often like to use this example. It's like a child. If you have a child and the child wants you to buy something. You're the child's parent or one who's a guardian of the child, and the child would like you to get something for them. And before they even ask, they begin off by praising, thanking you for all the things you already did. Now, if they do it too many times, you kind of get it. You'll be like, okay, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? But over that principle right there, all right, this is a principle, honor. Yes? And that verse, the next verse is also a verse that needs to be applied to heart and mind, where it says, verse 18, if I regard iniquity in my heart. All right, if I regard iniquity. Does KJV read like that? This is KJV. We're reading from the Sefer Tehillim. Let's look at verse 18 right here in the parallel Bible. Verse 18. Yeah, if I regard it, same reading. If I regard iniquity in my heart, Bamarinya, be libase. Libe is heart, right? In the Hebrew, we say libi. In them hard, we say libe. Like tomato, so to speak. Libi, Hebrew, libe, be libase. And in my heart, be libase. In my heart, bedel. In our Father prayer, where he says, forgive us our trespasses, we forgive others who trespass against us. The word bedelachin, our trespasses. Bedel is really like hurt, like wrongdoing, our hurt, our wrongdoing. Bedel, and in my heart, bedel. The n at the end is, according to the grammar, it's a direct object suffix marker. So the verb, it tells which word that the force of the verb is being placed on. So the verb here is aiche, he saw, aiche, I having seen. Belabase in my heart, and the heart pertaining to the mind, right? The mind, the thought, right? The thinking, but the lib, when expressing the mind, because the spirit also reflects the mind, but the spirit is usually the higher mind. Man is a trinity. Man has 3 brains, has a reptilian, cortex, the mammalian, and the higher brain. But here in the libase, the heart, the lib is the thought, the thinking, but is often connected with a feeling. You know how sometimes thought is often sometimes connected with a feeling or emotion, and it's like the two kind of play off of each other? Well, that there would be that mind of thought and feeling. Bedel and in my lib, bedel bedelin aiche. Having seen, hurt or wrong in my thought, my thinking, my feeling. Behon, aiche, behon. If I have been seeing, if I have been seeing, like if I have seen, and if I'm seeing, this is how I'm seeing, hurt in my heart. Geta corresponds to Adonai from the Hebrew, but Geta in the heart, Geta, Lord. Try to get into etymology, because when you get into the geta is like to restrain something. Geta can also be like to tame something. So Lord, the idea of Lord in the true sense is almost like self-control, like self-mastery, but self-mastery one, the Lord, right? The Geta, the boss. Geta, I shemanyim neber. He would not have heard, right? In a sense of not just he will not hear me, but he would not have heard me. So even more better than the translation says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me, or the Lord will not hear. Geta aisamanyim neber. Neber is a particle there that has a sense of was. Neber, right? Neber. I know one saw the neberu. Well, neberu in Ge'ez means they sat. Or they dwelt, they sat, neber. But here, neber in them heart has a sense of was. So I samanyim, he will not hear me, neber, he would not have heard me. To the sense of he would not have heard me. It's a very important principle. And when we came across this, our eyes and ears was open. We really meditated on that right there. It's like clean yourself, like cleanse yourself. Like it says, sanctify yourself. One will put on clean clothing or clean garments or wash their hands, like for dinner or whatever. In the same way, one would clear out, some of that, the hurt, the wrongdoing, the iniquity, the wrongdoing in one's own heart. But then he says in verse 19, but verily, but for show Elohim, Xavier have heard. He hath attended to the voice of my prayer. What's interesting in many of the Psalms and also prophetically in the Hebrew, sometimes in the Hebrew, when we read the prophets, the prophetic action, it's almost like it already has happened. And in a sense, that same principle is here. It's like when Rabbeinu Yeshua, Ayin Rabbi, the Rabbi, Yeshua HaMoshiach, when Jesus Christ, when he says, and when you pray, pray as you've already received your prayer, right? Pray as you already receive your prayer. And not just a prayer, but it's a certain mental, psychical principle, right, in this creation that kind of works. If you expect it, you can draw it. You know what I mean? But then if you have iniquity in your heart, it's almost like having interference. You got an interference. There's some interference there. You know what I mean? Like static. You got static, or like they say, white noise. And then it comes to this conclusion right here. Baruch Elohim. In Amharic, it has Xavier, the sustainer, Yemesken, be praised. Bringing out the sense of Baruch. Baruch, blessed, increase, prospered. Elohim is the source. Who hath not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from even from I. So here going to write up the royal, Amharic, just once again, like to share this right here. I did upload it, but I uploaded on another name. Didn't know that until I checked on it. But right here, I'd like to share this. We call this the KJV here meets the King James Version. We call this audio clip meets the HSV. The King James Version meets the HSV. The King James Version meets the Haile Selassie version of Hard Dub. Chronic's prayer on the Chronic's Dub prayer. Same prayer here.
Psalm 66. Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands. Sing forth the honor of his name. Make his praise glorious. Say unto God, how terrible art thou in thy works. Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves unto thee. All the earth shall worship thee, and shall sing unto thee. They shall sing to thy name. Selah. Come and see the works of God. He is terrible in his doing toward the children of men. He turned the sea into dry land. They went through the flood on foot. There did we rejoice in him. He ruleth by his power forever. His eyes behold the nations. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. Selah. Oh, bless our God, ye people, and make the voice of his praise to be heard, which holdeth our soul in life, and suffereth not our feet to be moved. For thou, O God, hast proved us. Thou hast tried us as silver is tried. Thou broughtest us into the net. Thou laidst affliction upon our loins. Thou hast caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water. But thou broughtest us out into a wealthy place. I will go into thy house with burnt offerings. I will pay thee my vows, which my lips have uttered, and my mouth hath spoken when I was in trouble. I will offer unto thee burnt sacrifices of fatlings, with the incense of rams. I will offer bullocks with goats. Selah. Come and hear, all ye that fear God, and I will declare what he hath done for my soul. I cried unto him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. But verily God hath heard me. He hath attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which hath not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from his mercy, 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 from his mercy.
መዝሙር 65 በቅንፍ ተሰሙ ለመዘምራን አለቃ የመነሳት የምስጋና መዝሙር። በምድር ያላችሁ ሁሉ ለእግዚአብሔር እልል በሉ፣ ለስሙም ዘምሩ፣ ለምስጋናውም ክብርን ስጡ። እግዚአብሔርን እንዲህ በሉ፣ ሥራህ ግሩም ነው፣ ኃይልህ ብዙ ሲሆን ጠላቶች ዋሹብህ። በምድር ያሉ ሁሉ ላንተ ይሰግዳሉ፣ ላንተም ይዘምራሉ፣ ለስምህም ይዘምራሉ። ኑ የእግዚአብሔርንም ሥራ እዩ። ከሰው ልጆች ይልቅ በምክር ግሩም ነው። ባህርን የብስ አደረጋት፣ ወንዙንም በእግር ተሻገሩ። በዚያ በእርሱ ደስ ይለናል። በኃይሉ ለዘላለም ይገዛል። ዓይኖቹ ወደ አሕዛብ ይመለከታሉ። አመፀኞች ራሳቸውን ከፍ ከፍ አያድርጉ። አሕዛብ ሆይ አምላካችንን ባርኩ፣ የምስጋናውንም ድምፅ አሰሙ። ነፍሴን በሕይወት ያኖራታል፣ እግሮቼንም ለመናወጥ አልሰጥም። አቤቱ ፈትነኸናልና ብርንም እንደሚያነጥሩት አንጥረኸናልና። ወደ ወጥመድ አገባኸን፣ በጀርባችንም መከራን አኖር። በራሳችን ላይ ሰውን አስረገጥከን፣ በእሳትና በውሃ መካከል አለፍን፣ ወደ ረፍትም አወጣን። ከሚቃጠል መሥዋዕት ጋር ወደ ቤትህ እገባለሁ። በመከራዬ ጊዜ በአፌ የተናገርኩትን ከንፈሮቼም ያሉትን ስለቴን ለአንተ እፈጽማለሁ። ከዕጣንና ከወጠጤዎች ጋር ለሚቃጠል መሥዋዕት ፍሪዳን አቀርባለሁ። ላሞችንና ፍየሎችን እሰዋልሃለሁ። እግዚአብሔርን የምትፈሩት ሁሉ ኑ ስሙኝ፣ ለነፍሴ ያደረገላትን ልንገራችሁ። በአፌ ወደ እርሱ ጮኽ፣ በአንደበቴም አመሰገንሁ። በልቤስ በደልን አይቼ ብሆን ጌታ አይሰማኝም ነበር። ስለዚህ እግዚአብሔር ሰማኝ፣ የልመናዬን ድምፅ አደመጠ። ጸሎቴን ያልከለከለኝ ምሕረቱንም ከኔ ያላራቀ እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን።
For with stammering lips and another tongue, for with stammering lips and another tongue, for with stammering lips and stammering lips and stammering lips and stammering lips. For whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breasts. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. For with stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people, to whom he said, this is the rest wherewith ye may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing.
Here. Basic Hebrew, here. Baby Hebrew, Shema Israel. 1 to 22. Abba Gadaha, Wazahata, Yakalama Nasa, Apa Sakarashata. Again. Basic Hebrew, Baby Hebrew, 1 to 22. 22. Abba Gadaha, Wazahata, Yakalama Nasa, Apa Sakarashata. Ta. Aleph. Ba Beit. Ga Gimel. Da Dalet. Ha Hey. Wa Wow. Za Zain. Ha Chet. Ta Tet. Ya Yod. Ka Kaf. La Lamed. Ma Bain. Na Nun. Sa Samech. A Ain. Pa Pei. Sa Sadai. Ka Kof. Ra Resh. Sha Shin. Ta Tau. Abagadaha. Wa Zahata. Yakalamana. Sa Apasa. Karasha. Ta.
Rastafari. Abagadaha. Wazahata. Yakalamana. Saifatada. Warashata. Abagadaha. Wazahata. Yakalamana. Saifatada. Warashata.
Psalm 66.
מזמור ס"ו, למנצח שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור, שיר מזמור.
Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands. Ye lands, ye lands, ye lands, ye lands.
הריעו לאלוהים כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ, כל הארץ.
Sing forth the honor of his name. Make his praise glorious. Say unto God, how terrible art thou in thy works. Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves unto thee. All the earth shall worship thee, and shall sing unto thee. They shall sing to thy name. See. Come and see the works of God. He is terrible in his doing toward the children of men. He turned the sea into dry land. They went through the flood on foot. There did we rejoice in him. He ruleth by his power forever. His eyes behold the nations. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. Oh, bless our God, ye people, and make the voice of his praise to be heard, which holdeth our soul in life, and suffereth not our feet to be moved. For thou, O God, hast proved us. Thou hast tried us as silver is tried. Thou broughtest us into the net. Thou laidst affliction upon our loins. Thou hast caused men to ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water, but thou broughtest us out into a wealthy place. I will go into thy house with burnt offerings. I will pay thee my vows, which my lips have uttered, and my mouth hath spoken when I was in trouble. I will offer unto thee burnt sacrifices of fatlings, with the incense of rams. I will offer bullocks with goats. Selah. Come and hear, all ye that fear God, and I will declare what he hath done for my soul. I cried unto him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. But verily God hath heard me. He hath attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which hath not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from his mercy from his mercy from from.
And here, Midrash today's Psalm is more Samek. Wow, Samek Vav, Samek Wow. Here, a study on Psalm 66, Mizmor Samek Wow. For the leader, a song, a psalm. Shout to God, all the earth. Sing forth the honor of his name. Here. Today's Mizmor, today's Psalm, Mizmor Samek Wow. Samek Vav, Psalm LXVI. Here. Hebraically, the Aleph and the Beit verse, verses 1 to 2. Lamnatzeyach, Shir Mizmor, Hari'u Lelohim, Kol Haaretz, Zamru Kavod Shemo, Simu Kavod Tihilato. Here. For the leader, for Lamnatzeyach, for the leader, the chief musician, the overcomer, Lamnatzeyach, Shir, a song, Shir, Mizmor, Mizmor, a psalm, a chant. Lamnatseyach Shir Mizmor. For the leader, a song, a psalm. Hari'u le'Elohim. Hari'u, shout. Hari'u le'Elohim. Le'Elohim. Shout to the power. Shout to Elohim. Hailehim. Hari'u le'Elohim. Call ha'aretz. All the earth. Call ha'aretz. Call ha'aretz. Zamru kavod shemo. Sing forth the honor of his name. Zamru, 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 chant Isis, chant Mizmor, Mizmor, chant Isis, Zamru, chant Isis, sing forth, chant Isis, Zamru, Kabod, the glory, sing praises, the Isis to the glory, Kabod, Shemo, Mizmor, Samek, wow, Lamnatseyach, Shir, Mizmor, Hari'u Lelo, Kol Haaretz, Zamru, Kavod, Shemo, 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 Shemo. These words, Zehu, Zehu Shamar Hakatuv, these words are to be considered in the light, in the illumination of what Scripture says elsewhere, even in Zephaniah Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9, where it reads, For then will I turn to the peoples a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. And here, Zephaniah ben Cushi. Here, Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, Zephaniah ben Cushi. Here, Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. Ki az epoka el amim. Safa berura likro kulam b'shem Yahuwah le'avdo Shechem echad may ever le'nahirei kush. For then will I turn to the peoples a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of Yahuwah, upon the name of Jehovah b'shem Yahuwah, to serve him with one consent from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Here. Ki az ehpok il amim. For then will I turn to the peoples. Ki az, for then ehpok, I turn il amim, to the peoples, to the amim. Safa berura, a pure language. Safa berura, a pure language, a pure tongue, a pure lip. Safa berura, safa lip berura, pure, purify. Likro kulam b'shem Yahuwah, that they may all call. Likro, to call upon, to, in a sense, to recite, to call out. Likro kulam, them all of them. B'shem Yahuwah, b'shem, in the Hashem, in the name of he who be, who he be, in the name, up on the name of Jehovah, li abdo Shechem echad, to serve him, li abdo, with one consent, li abdo Shechem, to serve, the sense here, with one shoulder, one consent from the Hebrew, the Shechem. The Shechem is the shoulder. Li abdo Shechem, to shoulder, to serve him with one shoulder. Shechem echad, shoulder one shoulder. Kiaz epoka il amim. Safa v'ura likro kulam b'shem Yahuwah le abdoa Shechem echad. May ever le nahirei kush, from beyond the rivers, the nahirei kush, from beyond the rivers of Kush. Here, Zephaniah ben Cushi. Here, Zephaniah, the son of Cushi. Rav Yochanan taught, what is the service? What is the service? To serve him with one consent. Le abdo Shechem echad. Rav Yochanan taught, what is the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What is the service of the Holy One, the set apart one, the sanctified one, the Isla one? Baruch Hu. It is prayer. It is tefillah. Tzelot, malet. It is tefillah, be'Ibrayist. In Hebrew, tefillah, prayer. Tzelot,
prayer in the Royal Amharic here, Hebraically, tefillah. It is prayer. Question: what is the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the Holy One, the Isla One, blessed be He? It is prayer, tefillahu. Moses implied this when he said, even in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 11 and 13, when Moshe said this, he implied that it is prayer. And it shall come to pass, if y'all shall hearken diligently to my commandments, that I command you this day to love the Lord your God, to serve him with all your heart. And here, Deuteronomy 11, verse 13. V'haya'im ashamoa tishma'u. V'haya'im shamoa tishma'u. Illa mitzvotai asher anokia mitzaweh hayom le'ahaba et Yahuwah Eloheikem. Here, the fuller verse. And it shall come to pass. Wahaya, and it shall come to pass. If y'all shall hearken diligently to my commandments. Wahaya im shamo'a tishame'ua illa mitzvotai. That I command you this day, Asher Anokia Mitzaweh Etekem Hayom, to love Yahuwah Jehovah, y'all Elohim, y'all power, Li Ahaba Eta Yahuwah Eloheikem, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. Ul Abdo Bikola Lebabikem, Ul Bikol Nafshikem. Here. Wahaya ima shamoa tishma'u illa mitzvotai asher anokia mitzaweh tekhem hayom le'ahaba eta Yahuwah Eloheikem ula abdoa b'kol lebabikem u b'kol nafshekem. Mazeh, what then is the service that a man may render to Ha'el, to the power, to Ha'elohim, the true good, the true God, Ha'elahim. What then is the service that a man may render to Ha'elohim? It is none other than tefillah. It is none other than tzalot. It's none other than prayer. As scripture says, even in the 100th Psalm, Hebraically at the second verse, the Beit verse, serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Ibdu et Yahuwah be'simcha, ba'u lefanayo bi'renana. Serve Jehovah with gladness. Ibdu et Yahuwah be'simcha. Come before his presence. Ba'u lefanayo, with singing. Bernana, bi'renana. Ibdu et Yahuwah be'simcha. Ba'u lefanayo bernana. And furthermore, in Psalm 95, the Aleph verse that reads, "Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make I shout for joy to the rock of our salvation. Lechu ne'rana la Yahuwah na'ri'ah litzora yish'ainu." Oh, come, lechu, come, y'all. Lechu, make I sing. Ne'rana. Ni'ranna, make I sing la Yahuwah to Jehovah. Nari'ah, make I shout. Nari'ah, litzor, to the rock, to the sor, litzor, yish'ainu, of our Yeshua, of our salvation, yish'ainu. Lechu, ni'ranna la Yahuwah. Nari'ah, litzor, yish'ainu. It was the prayer that Darius referred when he said to Daniel, even in Daniel chapter 6, verse 17, "Thy God, whom thou servest continually, thy God, whom thy service continually, itinually. Elaha kadia anta palachalech bita dirah, thy God, Elahak. Here, Daniel chapter 6, this part here of verse 17. Thy God, whom thou servest continually, itinually.
Elahak di anta palachleya bitadira. He will deliver, I liver thee. Hu yesheza vinach. Hu yeshez vinach. He will, I liver, deliver the I. Elahaka dia anta palachale bita dira. Hu yesheza vinach. For how did Daniel serve Ha'el, Ha'elohim, Ha'elahim, the power, the true good, the true God? By prayer, as is said furthermore here in Daniel chapter 6 at verse 11. And he kneeled up on his knees 3 times a day and prayed. And he, Daniel, kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed. Ve'zimnina telata ve'yoma hu bareka ala birakohi ua mitzale ua modek odame lahe kola kevela dia hiwa aved mina kadamata dena. Here, the fuller section. And he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day. 3 times a day. Ve'zimnin talata be'yoma hu bareka ala birkohi, and prayed. Umtzale and prayed. Modeh and gave thanks. Modea kodama elahe kola kevel dia hiva aved min kadamata dina, and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Wezimnina talata bi'yomahu bareka ala birkohi umatzale modea kodam elahe kolak evel diyahewa aved min kadamata dena. And here in Daniel from the Aramaic, the idea of praying when it says, and he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day. Ve'zimnina talata, here Aramaic talata, biyoma, 3 times a day, hu barek al berkohi. Here the idea of prayed, the sense is, the original meaning here of the root is to bend. So even the act of kneeling to bend. The idea of the talata biyoma, talata, in the Aramaic talata, right? Shalosha, shalasha, talata for 3. The custom of praying 3 times daily, evening, morning, and afternoon. This traditionally dates back to the times of the patriarchs, even the Hebrew Trinity, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And it also is referred to, and maybe referred to in the Psalms, such as in Psalm 55, round about verse 18. But the sense of prayed also tzale, as we have tzelot, right, with the royal Amharic, linking with the Aramaic, right there, tzale. The idea is to bend and also to give thanks. Modeh. Here the Aramaic modeh, the 3 acts of prayer. What are the 3 acts of prayer? The 3 acts of prayer is kneeling, bowing down, here rendered in the translation as praying, and praising, as described in this verse here in Daniel chapter 6, verse 11. This was practiced by the Yehudim, the Ahudoch, by the Judahites, the Jews, even we, the black Jews, in the Heikal Zaman, in the temple times. So here, Daniel, and he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed. Say to God, how fearful, how dreadful, how awful, awesome is thy walk. Through the greatness of thy might shall thine enemies dwindle away before thee. All the earth shall worship thee. Here, today's Mizmor, today's Psalm, today's Isis, Mizmor Samek Vav. Here, the Gimel, the Gamel, and the Dalet verses, Hebraically the 3rd to the 4th verses, here. Imru le'Elohim. Ma nora ma'iseka. Berov uzeka. Yikachshul leka. Oibeka. Kol ha'aretza yishatachu leka. We zamru lak. Here, Shema Yisrael. Here, from today's Psalm, he's Motosamek. Wow. Psalm 66. Here, he breaks the Gamel verses. Imru, say y'all. Imru le'Elohim. Say to Elohim. Say to the power. Imru le'Elohim. Ma nora ma iseka. How tremendous. How awesome. Ma nora. How dreadful. How awesome, how awful, ma'iseka is thy work. Imru le'Elohim, ma nora ma'iseka, be'rob uzeka, be'rob, enough, uzeka, enough of the I uz, the I oz, the I power. Ye kachishu leka oibeka, through the greatness, the enoughness of thy power, be'rob uzeka, be'rob, in the robe, enoughness of uzeka, of the I uz, uzeka, the I power. Ye kachishu leka oibeka, shall thine enemies oibeka dwindle away before the eye shall fade away. Ye kachishu leka oibeka. Call haaretz, all the earth, all the earthly plane. Call haaretz. Yishtachu leka, shall worship to thee, I, male. Here. Imru le'Elohim, to the Elohim. Say to the Elohim, Imru le'Elohim, ma nora ma'iseka, berob uzeka, yekachishu leka oibeka. Kol haaretz yishtachu leka. Even as it was said to Hayel, the Almighty, Elohim, the power at the Yam Suf, at the Red Sea, at the Etera Bahir, at the Sea of Reeds, the Eritrean Sea, even in Shemot, in Exodus chapter 15, here, verse 11, Exodus chapter 15, verse 11, where even as it was said to Elohim, who is like to thee, I, O Lord, among the mighty? Mi chamocha ba'elim Yahuwah, who me chamocha, like to thee I, male, mi chamocha ba'elim, amongst the elim, the mighty Yahuwah, O Jehovah, mi chamocha ba'elim Yahuwah. So now, I say to Ha'el, to the Almighty, to Ha Elohim, Ha'elohim, the power, how fearful, how dreadful, how awesome, how awful is thy walk. Through the greatness of thy might shall thine enemies dwindle away, fade away before thee, I. All the earth shall worship thee, I. So now, I say, Imru Elohim, I say, Ma nora ma'iseka, berob uzeka, yekachishu leka oibeka, kol haaretz yishtachu leka. This, Yeshayahu, Isaiah also said, this Isaiah also said, even in Isaiah chapter 66 at verse 23, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Wahaya mideya chodesha be chadisho, umidei shabata be shabato, yabo kola basara le hishatachota lifanai amar Yahuwah. And here, Yeshayahu, Isaiah, here, Isaiah chapter 66, here at verse 23. And it shall come to pass, wahaya, and it shall come to pass, wahaya, midei chodesha be chadisho, from one chodesh, new moon, be chadisho, to another, umidei shabbata be shabbato, and from one Shabbat to another, yabo kola basar, shall come all flesh, le hishatachot, to worship
worship lifanai, before, in the present, in the face, the perception, lifanai amar Yahovah, before I saith he who be who he be. Wahaya mideya chodesha be hadisho. Umidei Shabbat b'Shabbato. Yabo kol basar lehishatachot lifanai amar Yahuwah. This zot, this zehu shama hakatub. This is also said in the verse, even the verse from the 86th Psalm, Psalm 86, Hebraically the 9th verse that reads, all nations whom thou hast made shall come and worship before thee, O Lord, and shall glorify thy name. Here, Mizmor Fevav, Fe wow, Pe wow, Fe vav, here. Psalm 86, Hebraically here, the 8th verse, the 9th verse, that reads, Kol goyim, asher asita, ya bo'u, we yishatachu, le faneka, Adonai, we yakabdu, lishmeka. All nations call goyim, all nations, nationalities, Gentiles, heathen, call goyim, asher asita, asher that which asita, that which the eye has made, call goyim, asher asita, yabu shall come, yabu they shall come, we ishtachu, and prostrate and bow down and worship and prostrate, we ishtachu, li faneka, before the eye face, before the eye, in the eye face, in the eye presence, perception, lefanecha, lefaneka, Adonai, oh Adonai, Adonai, we kabdu, and shall glorify, and they shall glorify, we yikabdu, we kabdu, and shall give kavod, glory, lishmecha, lishmeka, lishmeka, to the Hashem, to the I name, to the Hashem. Kol goyim asher asita. Yabo we yishtachu lefaneka Adonai. We kabdu lishmeka. Bemet, indeed, not only shall all nations call goyim, worship thee, the I, but all the earth shall worship thee, I. Here, today's psalm is more Samek Wow, Samek Vav, Psalm 66, here, the Dalet verse, Kol Haaretz, Yishatachu Leka, all the earth. Indeed, not only shall call Hagoyim, call Goyim, all the nations, the heathens, the nationalities, worship the I, but Kol Haaretz, Yishtachu Leka, all the earth shall worship, shall bow down, shall prostrate to the I. Yishtachu Leka. Lamaze. Why so? Because flesh and blood will no longer have rule and dominion. Why so? Because flesh and blood will no longer have rule and dominion. So too, the sons of Korah, the sons of Bnei Korah, the sons of Korah said, oh, clap your hands, all ye peoples, shout to God with the voice of triumph. And here, Shema Yisrael, Mizmor, Mem, Zain, Mem Zain, Mem Zain. Here, Psalm 47, Hebraically the Beit, the second verse that reads, Kol ha'amim tiko'u kap, hari'u lelohim, v'kol rina. Oh, clap your hands, all ye peoples, call ha'amim. All ye amim, all ye peoples, call ha'amim, tiko'u kaf, tiko'u clap, kaf. Clap your hands, clap the kaf, the palms of your hands. Clap your hands, y'all, all your peoples, call ha'amim, tiko'u kaf, hari'u le'elohim, shout, hari'u le'elohim, shout to Elohim, shout to the power, be called by the voice of Rina, the voice of triumph. B'kol Rina, Kol Ha'amim, Tik'u Kaf, Hari'u Le'Elohim, B'kol Rina. Lamaze. Why? Because even in the words of the next verse, even of Mizmor, Mem, Zain, Psalm 47, the Lord Most High, fearful, will be the great King over all the earth.
The Lord Most High, fearful, dreadful, awful, will be the great king over all the earth. Here, Mizmor, Mem Zain, Mem Zain, Mem Zain. Here, Psalm 47. Here. The Gimel, the third Hebrew, the Gamel verse. Ki Yahuwah Elyon Norah Melech Gadol Al Kol Haaretz. Lamaze? Why? Because Ki Yahuwah, for Jehovah, he who be, Elyon, Most High, Elyon, Norah, dreadful, awful, Norah, Ki Yahuwah, Elyon, Norah, Melech Gadol, Al Kol Haaretz, a great king, Melech, king, Gadol, great, big up king, great king, Melech Gadol, all upon call, all Haaretz, upon all the earthly plane, over all the earth. Ki Yahuwah Elyon, Norah, Melech Gadol, Al Kol Haaretz. And here, then, in the words of Zechariah chapter 14, verse 9, then the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall the Lord be one, and his name one. Wahaya Yahuwah Limelech Al Kol Haaretz. Bayom Hahu Yihyeh Yahuwah Echad Ushemo Echad. And Jehovah, he who he be, shall be king over all the earth. With Haya Yahuwah Limelech Al Kol Haaretz. In that day, Bayom Hahu, shall he who he be one, and his name one. Yihyeh Yahuwah, Echad. Shall he who he be, will be Echad, would be Echad, one. And Shemo, his name Echad, his name one, Echad. Wahaya Yahuwah Li Melech Al Kol Haaretz. Bayom Hahu Yihyeh Yahuwah Echad Ushemo Echad. Echad.
Up the room.
From the upper room is beyond what they beyond. Distinguishing the light seekers from the peon. Ra, say it on us, lay upon us, knowledge that is eons. Old has it been told since the days of old, and I sit watching the story unfold. Yeshua gave us the code, gave us the name. Get the Maui Haile Selassie, the first will reign. The opener of the book of the seven seals. It's time for the gathering. It's the matter, and no, not the Vatican. Christ in his kingly character, we on that again. I'ma keep speaking the scriptures until I'm out of wind. On the true foundation, there's no shaking. There's no need of you hating, stop hesitating. How many of you have been waiting? In the upper room, we meeting in the upper room of Zion. From the upper room is beyond what they beyond. Distinguishing the light seekers from the peon. Ra, say it on us, lay upon us, knowledge that is eons. Old has it been told since the days of old, and I sit watching the story unfold. Yeshua gave us the code, gave us the name. Get the Maui Haile Selassie, the first will reign. The opener of the book of the seven seals. It's time for the gathering. It's the matter, and no, not the Vatican. Christ in his kingly character, we on that again. I'ma keep speaking the scriptures until I'm out of wind. On the true foundation, there's no shaking. There's no need of you hating, stop hesitating. How many of you have been waiting? In the upper room, We meeting in the upper rooms of Zion.
Abagadaha wa za ha ta. Ya ka la ma na sa a. Fa pa sa ka ra sha ta. 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 Abagadaha wa za ha ta. Ya ka la ma na sa a pa sa ka ra sha ta. Ta. Again, Abagadaha wazahata yakalamana sa a pa sa ka ra sha ta Abagadaha wazahata yakalamana sa a pa sa ka ra sha ta Abagadaha wa za ha ta yakalamana sa a pa sa ka ra sha ta. Here we call this baby Hebrew, basic Hebrew. Abagadaha wa za ha ta yakalamana sa a pa sa ka ra sha ta. Again. Abagadaha wa zahata yakalamana sa apa sa ka ra sha ta. Here, Shema Yisrael. Here, baby Hebrew or basic Hebrew or baby Hebrew. Abagadaha wa zahata yakalamana sa apa sa ka ra sha ta. Again. Abagadaha wazahata yakalamana sa apa sa ka ra sha ta.
Yes. Salam ta. Yes, I. Shalom, Havarim. Yes, I. Join I. Thank Jah. Rastafari. It's Friday. Shabbat coming forward. Shalom, Havarim. Hashem Yeshua HaMashiach. Sihari Mesken. Baruch Elohim.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.